Joe, you okay with reading that motion as soon as we go live?
Say what?
Are you okay with reading that as soon as we go live?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting tonight, Monday, March 26th. Tonight's meeting is going to start out with an executive session, so the meeting is now open, and we are going to convene an executive session, and then we will come back out of executive session, back into open session. So I will entertain a motion to go into executive session at this time.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Clause 3, to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the town's unions, since an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the board, and to convene an open session thereafter.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We do need to do a roll call vote. Mr. Glavy?
Aye.
Ms. Napoli?
Aye.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Chair's in favor, so it's 4-0. Okay, so folks, we're going to go into executive session now, and stay tuned. We'll come back live in open session within the next 30 minutes, hopefully. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are out of executive session, back into open session, and as we open every meeting, I'd ask the clerk to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you will, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
You missed a couple of things.
I did, I'm sure I did.
Again, welcome, everybody. March 26th, 2018, Board of Selectmen meeting. Our agenda is as follows. We have some mail that we need to read. We will then meet with our state legislators, Senator Eldridge and Representative Arciero. We will be discussing a couple different items. Most importantly, the impact that we hope that you are able to have with the Littleton Common Smart Sewer Project. We do have a couple of other items that we are addressing with you as well. At 7:25 or thereabouts, we plan to, we'll have an opportunity for public input. Any public input is welcome. Just ask that you raise your hand, be recognized by the chair, and once recognized, any comments should be made through the chair. And just identify yourself and your address. We'll do members' updates. Then we'll move on to town boards and departments. We haven't, the treasurer is going to give us an update on a bond obligation. Building commissioner succession plan is going to be discussed tonight as well. Then we'll move on to the annual special town meeting warrants. We're going to determine the order of the warrants and how they will appear. Then we will adopt recommendations on the warrants. Then we have an opportunity for the town administrator, assistant town administrator, to give us some updates, including a dedication for the 2017 annual town report. We'll look at some minutes and hopefully adjourn relatively close to 9 p.m. So without further ado, Mr. Bergman, if you could lead us with the mail, please.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, just a few items. First, we received a save the date reminder from the Commonwealth for an economic development summit scheduled for Tuesday, March 1st. It will feature Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito, and Secretary Jay Ash, and that will be in Worcester. The Littleton Cultural Council has invited the board to a reception that it's planning for Thursday, April 26th, for this year's grant recipients of Cultural Council grants, and I see that among the speakers are these two guys here in the front row. So look forward to seeing you back. Also in the mail packet is a certificate. We are now certifiably friendly to, or age friendly, from the AARP. The Board of Selectmen had voted back in February to be part of an effort with our neighboring communities, the 13 towns of the Magic Subregion plus the town of Westford. So we've got our certificate to prove it. So, and also we got this afternoon information from the Highway Department that the transfer station will be accepting tree and brush storm debris from Tuesday, March 27th through Saturday, April 14th, if you're wondering. I'm wondering that in Concord, and I'm not sure what the dates are yet, but there's a lot of debris by the roadside building up everywhere. So great that we'll be making these accommodations. So that's it for the mail pack.
Just to kind of jump on that, the debris that is on the roadside doesn't mean that folks that had branches fall down on the back of their property, they can drag them out to the roadside and the town will pick them up and chip them and whatnot. Any of that can be brought to the transfer station,
Right.
free of charge, whether or not you have a transfer station sticker. If you do not have a sticker, you do need to just check in with Chris or Phyllis or with the attendants there. But the roadside removal is for town-owned trees and limbs. So I don't know how they're going to be able to
Don't
determine
get
that,
any
but
ideas. Yeah. They usually help us.
right. Okay, so next up on our agenda, we do welcome our state senator, Jamie Eldridge, and our state representative, Jim Arciero. Yes, if you guys want to come forward, we'd love to
Great, thank you.
welcome, thank you for coming. Appreciate you guys coming out.
Thank you.
I guess we'll, you guys want to
Yeah,
give us a
sure.
quick update? We'll do that,
Certainly.
and then we'll,
And we'll just go with questions.
Thank you.
I'll just,
They're up on the screen.
I know, that's, I love the technology. But,
We can make them move.
yeah, that'd be interesting, Keith.
Good emojis.
Thank you. Well, thank you to the members of the board, Mr. Chairman, Anthony and Keith. Appreciate coming in. Senator Eldridge and I really enjoy working together here for the folks of Littleton. And I'm gonna give my typical sort of update of kind of the process of the budget. And then I think from there, it'd be easier to move forward and ask questions. Things sort of started up for the legislature in December with something called a consensus revenue hearing. And essentially what that is members of the Joint Ways and Means Committee, which the senator and I both sit on this year. We hear from economists, we hear from stakeholders, financial analysts on how to build the budget, the $43 billion budget. And from there, the governor comes out with his budget, something called House 1 and House 2. This year, it's approximately $43 billion. And when his budget is released, very often, the Ways and Means Committee takes a first stab at it before their budget deliberations. Myself and the senator, with the joint committee, crisscrossed the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We had public hearings all from Pittsfield almost all the way down to Cape Cod. So right now, the budget is built on an increase of about 2.6% increase in spending. According to economists, according to the Administration in Finance and Ways and Means chairs, that looks approximately, the estimations are about a 3.5% increase, so it was a conservative figure. But I think in the last 2 fiscal years, with uncertain economic times, we didn't want to have to go back to cities and towns and have to alter any of the budget allocations or make any changes before the final budget was completed in August. The governor's budget's allocated about a little over $1 billion for general local aid, an increase of almost 40 million from last fiscal year. Chapter 70 school aid totaled about 4.75 billion, a boost of almost 119 million. And that comes down to about a 2.6% increase from last fiscal year. But also there's been some critics of the local aid and Chapter 70 monies for this fiscal year that the governor had put forward, that in the actual, it's actually a decrease from 2002 when you actually built in inflation. But I do understand that in defense of the governor, in defense of budget writers. If you go back to 2002, we've had numerous fiscal crises. We had the economic downturn in 2008. I know coming in when the senator was first sworn in as senator, I was first sworn in as a state representative, we had over a $4 billion deficit that we had to find ways to make our budget balance. Constitutionally, we have a balanced budget. We have to have a balanced budget every fiscal year. So when revenues and expenses are not adding up, either cuts or additional increases have to be made. But currently in this fiscal year, the revenue projections are moving in the right direction. We're about $810 million over benchmark, which is a good thing. So we're moving in the right direction. But there's some fiscal challenges I think I would like to address when it comes to the budget. So it's $43 billion in the entire state budget. But we do have fixed costs. So almost 40% of the $43 billion budget is in healthcare, whether that be Mass Health, Medicaid. We have fixed costs when it comes to obligatory spending for the MBTA, for Chapter 70. So almost 2/3 of the budget is obligatory. And so then we have to look at when it comes to social service issues, substance abuse, issues with local aid, public safety. When times are difficult and the revenues are not coming in, adjustments have to be made or revenues have to be looked at. So it's always important to know it's a $43 billion budget, but how much we can actually work with is certainly a lot smaller than that. A couple of the other challenges is ballot initiatives. So our bottom line, moving forward is going to be finding a way to have a balanced budget. So early April, the House of Representatives is going to come out with their version of the budget. We're going to have our budget debate towards the end of April, and we anticipate on finishing it around the end of April. The early part of May, the Senate will then have their version of the budget, and they'll have their debate. We will then have a conference committee and deal with a final product, dealing with the governor's vetoes and possible overrides of those vetoes. But there's some things that are gonna affect our bottom line too. One is, next fiscal year, there's the millionaire's tax issue that's gonna be on the ballot. That's the fair share amendment. It's a 4% surtax on income over $1 million. The estimates on that is anywhere from 1.7 to $2 billion. The income tax rollback initiative. This is something that's on the ballot as well. And that's an estimated $1.3 billion subtracted from the state budget, if that passes. So you look at an increase of possibly $2 billion on the millionaire's tax if that passes, but then a decrease of $1.3 billion if the rollback of the income tax from 6.25% to 5%. Then you have issues like the Paid Family Sick Leave Act, which could estimate having an impact on the state budget from $100 to $150 million. And then lastly, just so you got all that, is any kind of changes in Washington DC, whether through Congress or the Trump administration, if there are, for instance, budgets that impact, in either healthcare or impact the bottom line when it comes to block grants, public safety, that can all have an impact on the final state budget as well. So I think those are things that are important to understand when you think about such a large budget document and how much it affects for all of the revenue for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that this is kind of an interesting year, that there are gonna be a number of ballot initiatives that could have a serious effect on our bottom line. So I think from that, I would like to start to get a little more local. And I think, Senator, the best way to do this would probably be to go through the list, Keith, I think that you had provided us, and however you want
Yeah.
to tackle those issues.
Yeah. We have a draft list, and I think it's probably the sense of the board that the one that we want to focus on most is the one at the top of the list. It's a long list, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything new on the list. We have a lot of asks. There are a lot of things that we ask for your help on with state government, and there's a lot of things that you're doing for us. Just this week alone, this Friday, we're meeting with the MBTA on commuter rail parking. We really appreciate your setting up that meeting for us. A couple of weeks ago, you got MassDOT folks here to talk at the high school about improving the signalization for the intersection in front of the high school. It's just a long list of things, and we appreciate all that. We try to think of as many things as we need, and it's a long list. And we really appreciate your help. Also most recently, the $50,000 earmark for the Littleton Fire and Police Departments, which we are very appreciative of your
If I briefly say something about that, that was, I think the senator and I, we would have to say that was the hardest 50,000 we ever. That money was earmarked in the 2017 budget. It was vetoed. We overrode it, and then we submitted it again for 2018. It was vetoed. We overrode it, and then 2019, it was vetoed. We overrode it, and it wasn't 9 seed, so it was a big victory for us. So just let you know that sometimes things don't always come as they seem, and we're happy to be able to get that earmark for public safety for the town of Littleton.
It's definitely appreciated. I think that Keith, in starting his comments, we definitely appreciate all that you do. When we do reach out, you guys answer the bell for us. Our biggest and highest concern right now is to get your assistance and your help, helping us to navigate. And frankly, putting a feather in your caps, because the smart sewer project that we've proposed and the efforts that Keith and Paul, Paul and Chase are champions as a goal for the Board of Selectmen, in bringing this to fruition. And this is something that we've got on the May town meeting warrant article for funding of the design, $1.5 million. It's a borrowing article, so we need 2/3 vote. So any support in efforts that we can garner from you to help us to get additional funding sources, to help us, kind of navigating grant possibilities. And I'll open it up to Keith and, to Paul and, I confuse you guys all the time. To
It's the red
to
hair.
Paul and Chase, yeah, right?
First off, in terms of greeting, I'll repeat what I usually say, and that's, or it's become more real, I guess, in the past couple of years since the both of you have been on the Ways and Means Committee, in that we know how much we appreciate you and your work that you do for individual residents and for the town as a whole, and how well you work together. I think the fact that you both landed on the Ways and Means Committee, the powerful budget writing committee, shows that your colleagues feel about you the same way. So we want to take full advantage of that.
Which you should.
And I'll let you know, I briefed, I probably was, I'll get scolded as a former legislative aide, as both of you guys are too. I informed all the board, you should never give a laundry list, because the rule of thumb is that the legislator will pick out the easiest thing to do, and you have to thank them for that. We should never have done that,
So 36 million and 50,000?
Yeah, no, you should look at that list, we appreciate it all, but you should just be seeing smart sewer. And
Gotcha.
we've been
Thank you.
warning you this for a couple of years. We're at the point now where the town has voted affirmatively twice at town meeting to support putting monies away for our studies. We have Weston and Sampson engineers on board. We're acting on a conceptual plan that was done with a grant that was acquired by the Charles River Watershed Association to do something innovative. We're taking the basic bare bones of traditional sewering, and we're marrying that with all the also tried and true environmental technologies that make full use of the gases and the hot waters and all the rest of it that's created in that, so that our smart sewer proposal is not only good for Littleton in terms of reducing the nitrate loading in the common area, allowing us to replenish the wells on the other side of town, which is where the water comes from, encouraging the economic growth, which is the greatest hindrance we have at the common area right now is the lack of sewering. But also to do so, we're doing it by creating a model that could really be copied across the state. And not just, sewering in and of itself is a benefit, but there's no reason every other community should not be looking at tacking on the smart component of it, because it's all a savings, and it's not magical fairy dust with sprinkling here. All these are technologies that have been tried and true, but people haven't bothered to put them together. So our engineers have identified all the usual funding programs, and we will be pursuing all those. But above and beyond that, we hope that you folks will agree that here's an opportunity, whether it's the legislature or whether it's the legislature in conjunction with the administration, to tout this as something that other communities should want to do, and the best way to do that is to give us money. So it's going to cost about $30 to $37 million to build out the system. We do have modeling that shows the that being paid for on a it'll pay for itself by the betterment fees that are currently anticipated for the people who live in the district. There's a couple of rules of thumb we've adopted locally on here. One is that it pays for itself. It isn't going to be this cost spread out across the town because it's a limited area of the town. Doesn't mean that's the end of the game for us. We may on success choose to expand. We also, for the people who are property owners inside it, we're making it opt-in. But we're hoping on a bullish way that they have an opportunity to, they'll make the right choice and get involved. And then the third part is that, while it's in our interest to include all the smart technologies, that's not the norm. So you kind of have to educate the engineers along the way to, make this part of the game. And You know, you know, oh, sure, and direct it to Chase, because he's the technical guy, I'm the political guy.
Well, thank you, Paul, and I thank you to you and Chase for your support on it, and all, obviously, like Keith's great work on it. Is part of the smart technology the anaerobic digester? Is that part of the plan?
I knew that one, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And that's
Very
really,
exciting.
you know, that's where we can pair taking all that energy from the wastewater, all the latent energy in that organic
Right.
material, turning it into electricity that we
Yeah.
can ultimately utilize to offset, you know, what's coming from the grid. And then on top of that, you know, dealing with some food waste in there, that amendment helps that anaerobic digester work a little bit. So that allows us to also provide a revenue stream for the system that offsets
Yeah.
the cost. Part of this is, you know, this is one of those opportunities, frankly, it's one of those rare opportunities where doing something green is also beneficial in an economic way. So what we're able to do with the anaerobic digester aspect is offset some of those operational costs that the users would otherwise be facing. Now, there's slightly higher capital costs to do that, but in the long run, it ends up being, worst case scenario, comparable economically, but now we have the environmental benefit on top of it. So, so by pairing those, we can actually do something good for the environment. We can address a local need, and frankly, we can help our constituents take care of a fundamental problem in the common for them, which is, you know, we want our business owners in the common to be able to run a business, not be
Right, to
wastewater
expand.
operators, you know, and
Yep.
to the extent that we can pull in some residences into the district we have, because it's a burden for them as well. But one of the objectives here is to keep it small and local, in the sense both of where the waste is coming from. You know, the acronym is a CORC, a Community Waste Energy Resource Center, and that community aspect of it is really important, because we're dealing with our community's waste in terms of food waste, in terms of sewage, but also the benefits are localized as well. So what we're trying to do is marry those things together in a way that benefits both the users and frankly, in the town as a whole through the economic development aspect.
And so there is the SRF program through the Clean Water Trust, so has there been an application, or would that come after the vote at?
We're looking at, it'll come after the vote at town meeting in the spring, at our
Okay.
May town meeting, and so we're looking at,
August, is that what we were
yeah,
anticipating?
we're looking at August, we're going after, this is just our list of
Yeah.
funding sources that we'll be going after, including the SRF fund for the low-interest loans, including a MassWorks grant application. We'd love it to find its way into a line item that the Ways and Means Committee should
Small
just
earmark for
drop into
$36
the,
million,
yeah,
yep.
yeah. We'll settle for half of that in cash. so.
Split the difference.
Put an
A
outside
lot of
section.
public safety radios.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Wherever you find it, I don't think we will complain.
Yeah, so we're hoping to
Only
get
when you
it,
don't find it.
yeah, I mean, our target is to get at least $4 million in outside grant
Yeah,
funding
that's
that
very
would really help.
Consider
to
that the
float-
ante.
Yeah, I was gonna
Help
say,
to float the
that's
boat.
where we're opening, the discussion.
That's kind of like we figure what any senator and rep could do.
Very subtle.
Yeah, I understood that when you had those nice comments in the beginning, Paul, they were leading up to
I
something.
think there's a but.
Okay,
It really, truly would be a model for the state.
Yeah, it would be.
So the Baker Clinton administration should really, prioritize it, so we'll advocate for that.
Advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not unaware. We had a room full of probably 7 or 8 officials from Worcester Region DEP last summer here, and you guys know Keith. He's been all over Secretary Ash. I think Chuck has been too, and
They've
I don't know,
been
it's just-
private messaging.
Right,
may I ask you a
right.
question? Has there been models of something similar to this in, New England states or neighboring states?
Well, Bob Zimmerman's answer to that is that there's no one place that's put it all together, but all the technologies exist.
Yeah, I mean,
By themselves, with the unusual part, what's unusual here is that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck by doing as many of the technologies together to achieve a result that is especially smart. So, the most asked question I get, because I briefed the governor's office and Secretary Ash and others, and so you say, I need to talk to you about Littleton's smart sewer, and they then say, what's smart about it? So we do have the elevator speech to go with it, but I think we're looking for the next level of, whether it's a DP commissioner, or the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs that I think are the next folks that we want to see. I've already told Jay several times that, MassWorks grant, but we'll need to be going through DEP and the environmental agencies as well. So-
And no aspect of this technology is any newer than 30 to 40 years. I mean, what is unique is that putting the pieces together to maximize the benefit for the system.
Yeah.
And, and every one of those components of the system operates in New England. But again, they just don't operate all in concert with one another. And you can imagine, I mean, we're not a board who favors risk, right? So that was a big part of what we're looking at is avoiding risk to the extent possible. And this system.
Yeah, I mean, some of the
does that.
things that are smart about it from Littleton's standpoint is we're in two watersheds. One half of the town is in one and the other half is in another, and we tend to take from our well sources, we take the water out of one and we use it in the other and dump it in. This allows us to recharge the watershed from which we're taking the water. That's smart. It's smart that we're promoting growth and development in a particular area rather than in all of town. That long ago, our voters told us in the Littleton Common zoning, and more recently, the master plan update, that revitalizing the Littleton Common area is a top priority for the town. And so we want to do as good a job as we can there, and that requires the infrastructure.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've made, I see Richard Crowley from the planning book, that we've made innovative changes to the zoning bylaw with overlay district zoning. But what we're finding, not a surprise, is that to fully maximize even those possibilities, it's pipes under the ground, it's sewering, and it's, and parking too is another, infrastructure. But it's infrastructure issues that are hampering things, primarily the sewer.
Absolutely. I just wanted to highlight, and I'll do an abridged version, the letter that I gave you all to add to what Representative Arciero presented. And I really do want to, first of all, we have a very strong partnership. I do want to commend him for securing that earmark, because that was secured in the House budget, and then we worked together to make sure it was in the final budget. But for the letter that I gave you, just looking at the second page, just so you have a sense of some of my budget priorities that affect Littleton, but sometimes there's not an immediate focus on them, is on the second page, it's item number 3 is maintaining funding for vital social safety net services, programs to help the homeless, low-income families, at-risk children, those with disabilities, and the elderly. With respect to senior citizens, every year for the past 3 years, we've increased by $1 the COA funding, council on age funding. So depending on how many seniors are in the town, you get X amount of dollars. So we're looking to increase that, I believe, to $12 per senior. So that would provide more money for programming for the COA here. Item 4, which would really affect the school district, is the Foundation Budget Review Commission. So that's a commission that had a report in 2015 that looked at everything from health insurance costs to ELL student population to special ed to Chapter 70. And so if we fully funded that, that would mean dramatically more funding for the Littleton school system. So that's a priority. We already sort of discussed about capital infrastructure, so, we're working closely on transportation. Hopefully we can secure water infrastructure investments. And then the last item, protecting the environment, which, for me is a legacy to my work going back to my work for former State Senator Pam Reeser, former State Senator Bob Duran, which is how I met Paul, is protecting the environment. So what we're trying to do is get to 1% of the state budget being dedicated to the environment. And part of that, in my opinion, is water infrastructure. We're not doing enough to invest at the state level for water infrastructure, and hopefully that can change. So just wanted to highlight those items, and I look forward to the meeting on Friday with the MBTA. And I think we're still waiting on a response from DOT about the traffic light and the efforts on King Street, so.
Exactly. I think last time, when we last had met, something I kind of wanted to bring up to the board as well, is the fact that I talked to one of the DOT engineers at the time, and they thought the initial plans for the study for the traffic light would be anywhere from $250,000 to $275,000. And our budget rapidly approaching in April, I already had my budget meeting. To actually get something in the budget as an amendment would be part of the amendment process. It wouldn't be something I could initially meet with the chairman about, so that just put us a little bit of a disadvantage, but it's just a timing issue. And when we met with DOT, we're still waiting to hear back from, I believe, Keith, you'd probably be hearing from them simultaneously at the same time to find out how much a study would cost. And if that study would be through the DOT, meaning that they would be appropriating it through DOT,
Right.
or we would actually have to get something in the budget to expedite, the study. So we still want to hear back from them to find out what that cost is going to be, and moving forward, what we need to do.
So they're looking to do a study.
We had the meeting at Littleton High School.
Right.
And leaving that meeting, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong, Senator, is they were gonna come back to tell us the cost of conducting the study, to find out the total cost of the project and the feasibility of it.
Okay. So it's the total cost of implementation.
Yeah, but they'll probably,
Not the
I'd
study.
assume, would come back to tell you if it's feasible as well. I mean, and what it would cost, et cetera, and the reconfigurations of the area, of, the infrastructure in the area. That's how it was left with me when we left. Keith, tell me if you have anything to add to that, or the senator, so.
Yeah, I was just looking back at Peter Kavici, who was I think the senior person there, was anticipates this was beginning of March, indicating that they would be doing some counting, some traffic counts sometime in March. This was, I think, between the winter storm,
Whether they
you know,
cooperate with that.
That's certainly.
before or after Skylar, I forget, but they would be getting us information within a couple of weeks after that, so we'll continue to follow up with them.
Okay.
We appreciate everything you did and helped us with on Willow Street, Bruce Willow, that intersection, and that, I mean, it would be awesome if we could reiterate that and have that happen here.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
That was expedited in large part because there was a fatality, there was a near fatality, and the operators that are in and out of that driveway, in large part, are junior operators. And it's high risk. I don't want it to be a situation where we're being reactive because we just had a really bad accident. So when we drive down 110, with my 2 terms on school committee, I've been fighting this fight. And so, we're keeping it alive here, and it's something that we feel is important, public safety, right? So we were told in the past, it's a state road, we can't do it, we can't put blinking signs up, we can't put a traffic light up there. Then we drive down through Westford, and we've got blinking signs up and crosswalks at a private function. At Kimball's, there's 2 crosswalks with blinking lights. We can't do it at a school where children are in and out of that facility daily. And then you go further down the road, and there's another school, it's a traffic light and blinking lights. Now, we have a blinking light, which doesn't do anything. I mean, I'm not saying people speed up at it, but it's white noise. And that was their way of kind of placating us at the time. So, it is very much a priority for the school department, it's a priority for the town, and I know it's a priority for the residents and the school, the principal, the PD, the chief could probably speak to this, and I don't wanna steal the thunder of the smart sewer, because that is our, you know, that's certainly
Absolutely, yeah.
a high priority, but,
Absolutely.
the lives of our youth and.
Sewer
all those
line
in
does
them.
go right down that way, so while they're down there, they can probably just toss up a, stick.
Right.
Well, Mr. Chairman, to your point, we understand, you know, your concern, and, you know, it's a priority for ours as well. We do have to wait to hear back from, you know, Governor Baker's administration to hear, you know, what the confines of the study are, so, and then we'll.
I was thinking maybe Jeff could be down there and direct traffic for us, just in the interim.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I know that you take it seriously, and
Yeah, of
you
course.
guys acted quickly when we reached out. and
Yeah,
said,
no,
you know,
absolutely.
We ran into each other at the event at the high school. and Right, the opioids.
Right.
Right,
Right.
so, you know, we've acted quickly, and I'd like to just keep that momentum.
Certainly, absolutely, Mr.
I
Chairman.
appreciate that.
Yep.
But sewers are really important.
Because I did want to let city know, I know, first of all, thank you for organizing that forum on the opioid crisis, as that is a bill. Governor Baker filed the bill, and it's going through the committee process. So I think there'll be another piece of legislation to address opioid epidemic.
Excellent. I left you some business cards.
Oh,
Oh,
great.
yeah.
There's
for
some
us,
Littleton Coalition Against Addiction. We just had
you
some
very
cards
much.
made up. We've received a little bit of
To the,
funding, so.
you know, and
Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts, and I know Mr. Chairman was there as well that night. The Senator and I had an opportunity to be there to hear the powerful stories about addiction and the stigma surrounding it. A few things that are in Governor Baker, because obviously it's been one of his priorities and the legislature's priorities moving forward, since this has become certainly an epidemic over the last 10 years. Massachusetts is the first in the nation to secure a 115 waiver with the federal government. That means that it's gonna be over $219 million over the next 3 years through Medicaid to deal with, you know, substance abuse treatment and prevention. Moreover, the administration has added 1,100 beds over the last 2 years, and there's another 500 to 600 that are going to be established for treatment over the next few years. And the DPH, Department of Public Health, and under that Department of Public Health, the Bureau of Substance Abuse, there's been about $149 million that's been part of the DPH budget dealing with prevention, awareness, and specifically treatment. So, as you know, and hearing the stories all the time and every
Right.
day, it's gonna take a lot more than just funding. It's gonna take people that are working together to make sure we get our arms around this.
Right, right. That's excellent to hear. That's wonderful that the funding, it's on the radar of the people that matter that can fund it. We're definitely raising awareness here in the community, and that event, although it wasn't that well attended, it actually brought together a really core group of people, not just from Littleton, but from local communities. It brought together the right people, and so we've moved forward with the coalition, and we've got some plans in place for other things to do in town, such as support groups and things like that, community events, and so we're just gonna keep getting the word out there and letting people know that they can get help if they need it, if not for themselves, but for a family
And
member.
continue to use our offices too as resources as new funding
Right.
materializes in the budget and new initiatives are put forward by the administration and the legislature.
Okay, that's excellent, thank you. I also, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, I wanted to mention
Hijacking the
the,
meeting.
yeah, if I can, the legislation you just filed that would allow retired police officers to serve as school resource officers. I thought that was really interesting. I came across that on Facebook today.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I want to thank you for doing that. There was a lot of positive feedback
Yeah, I mean, you
from what
know,
I
the
saw.
tragedies were all horrific tragedies we're seeing, you know, across the nation, and we're seeing young people really try to take their country back on these
Right,
issues.
right,
And we support them. But also, we want to make sure that our schools are safe as well.
right.
And I think, as you folks know, on the municipal level, the budgets are tight. And this idea actually came from the local level. It came through a conversation I had with Tom McEnany, the chief from Westford, and the whole idea about allowing retired police officers to serve as SROs really comes from the fact that in the Massachusetts general laws, under pension laws, a retired police officer can only work 960 hours, which equates to about 120 days, which is not a full school year. Full school year is 180. So it's allowing a pool of talented individuals first to have the opportunity, if that town decides,
Right,
and also a cost-effective way to do it.
right,
So
right.
that's how I envision it, and that's how we envisioned it, and, we just filed it, we're getting co-sponsors, and so, I think we have some momentum with it, but, certainly there's gonna be a hearing process, and, the legislative process can sometimes be, a rocky road, and depending upon who's for and against it, but, that's where we're starting.
Right, it's excellent.
That's where these great ideas come from, too.
Right,
They're all,
right.
just coffee shop
On the
conversations.
local levels.
and-
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what our job is, really, it's just listening to our people and trying to figure out best ways to accomplish things.
Right,
Thanks, Jim.
excellent, thank you.
Any other members have anything specific?
Before they go, the very next agenda item is yet another thing for your list. It doesn't displace the sewer, the smart sewer in the number one position. But we did become aware that two of our local businesses are submitting applications for grants under the MassDOT's Industrial Rail Access Program, and the application deadline is this Thursday, and they're looking for letters of support from the board, but they're also looking for support from our legislators as well. And so we've got representatives here from Middlesex and also from Injection Molding Enterprise, who's a tenant at Patriot
Don't you
Beverage,
dare.
who are here tonight to get a vote of support from the Board of Selectmen, but we also wanted to make you aware that they're each looking for up to $500,000 for this MassDOT program, so.
So we can turn those letters over very quickly.
Yeah.
Essentially
I've got-
tomorrow or the next day.
I've got.
And just to reiterate, this is not an either-or.
And,
This
can
is
can you please forward us all the information?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely, you bet, yeah.
Well, we have Jamie's signature right here, so we can make this happen.
Yeah, yeah.
It's happened before.
That's great.
Yeah, actually, it is great, because, we had some concerns, some folks had some concerns about traffic when Patriot Beverage was coming online and using the
Yeah.
Very Fine plant. There was some
course, yeah.
concerns on town meeting floor that, traffic bringing product in and out and that kind of thing. So using the railway and kind of going back in time and using, the rail to deliver products and,
Yeah.
bring raw materials in and bring product out.
Yeah,
is,
it addresses the, the greenhouse gas,
Yeah.
targets.
A lot of
that-
trucks
I mean,
on the
road.
Cumulatively between, there's, one of these applications would reduce the number of truck trips by 12,800 per year. That's a lot. That's Middlesex, and the other would eliminate 1,320 truck trips. And so it's a lot of activity
1,000
that's
trips.
not on the roads.
Yeah.
And hope that Littleton is competitive in that program, so.
Yep. And then I see also you have a Green Communities application, Complete Streets.
Yes, yeah, we just submitted Green Communities, and we'll be submitting a Complete Streets grant in the next month or so.
Great.
It's gonna be a busy
Very
town meeting
successful.
for you guys, huh?
Yeah, but it's-
There's a lot of things on that.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
but what we mostly want is the money for the smart sewer.
We're navigating the other stuff pretty fine.
Getting there.
We know where you are if we need to reach out and
I'll
tap on the
surmise
shoulder.
from this meeting tonight, that's
Right.
the priority.
Would an information
Between lunch and-
be in order to them that we can, on the smart sewer,
Yeah.
we could send to you, like, the PowerPoint
Yeah, they've got
presentation we've had?
the-
They do already
they have
have
the
that?
PowerPoint,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. But if there's any follow-up questions, then Keith is a good,
We'll be glad, we'll send a tag team, including Bob
Right.
Zimmerman, who'll just sit down in your
gonna say,
office for the afternoon sometime.
We're putting together a piece, I'm hoping we're putting together a piece that is basically a one-page, maybe a two-page, front and back, that answers a lot, it's an FAQ sheet, essentially, so it answers a lot of the questions. And Jay Ash at MMA, Jay Ash said, what makes it smart? I mean, is it smarter than other people's waste?
Yeah,
So that question goes up a lot, and it has to do with the technology and reuse, and, but if there's that single sheet, and you can shoot a PDF to someone that's asking a question or something like that, it just makes it a lot
Be
easier.
helpful.
I think so, without having to sit through a 2-hour Bob Zimmerman presentation.
Yeah, I've sat through
That's
those,
all
yeah.
I enjoy it. I mean, I do it over and over, and I keep
Bob, I
replaying it
know-
on my
We know you're
phone.
watching, we love those.
But we very much appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Happy to come in.
And the work that you're putting in for us. And, if there's anything that we can do in support, if you need letters from us for, just to help you to advocate for something.
Absolutely, appreciate
It
that.
works both ways, so it's a collaborative effort, and we do appreciate what you do for us. Just keep doing it.
great, thank you.
That's right. Squeaky wheel.
We appreciate all that you do.
Yes,
We are
thank
well
you.
served.
So we'll be in touch.
Very good. Thank you for coming tonight.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Thanks.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, you do, but I know you're busy.
So now we can vote on, we can hear from the applicants for, yeah, I know that they want to try to,
Are they trying to catch that?
yeah, they want to try to catch them, so.
So we don't need them, right, if we do?
You could, I know, I'd like to get a motion to support the application. We have letters of support that are ready. The
Yeah.
applicants are here if you like.
Does anybody have any issues with the
Not at all.
No.
Okay.
For the benefit of the
Community?
community, I wouldn't mind if there was a little bit more repeat of what it is we're actually voting to support here.
Yeah, okay.
You want
A
to?
Keith summary is fine on that, I mean,
Yeah, we're looking to, it's an application to the Mass Department of Transportation for restoration and extension of freight rail sidings that are on the Fitchburg line. It's a grant program that covers up to $500,000 towards the total project cost. And we have applications from two applications from local communities, Middlesex Corporation, and also the Injection Molding Enterprise, who's working with Patriot Beverage.
Yeah, it's, if anybody has any comments, do you want any more clarification on that, or?
no, I think it's worth repeating, the impact on the community should be, you'll experience less truck traffic on the road.
Right. Yeah, so there's huge benefit to us as a community, taking about 1,000 truck trips off the road through Middleton, and utilizing the rail that runs by both of these properties. So I
Yes.
think that makes good sense, so I'll entertain that motion.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to support 2 grant applications to the Massachusetts Department of Transportation of the Mass DOT's Industrial Rail Access Program, IRAP, for restoration and extension of freight rail sidings on the Fitchburg Main Line in Littleton, one from Middlesex Corporation, 80 Air Road, and the other from Injection Molding Enterprises and Patriot Beverage LLC at 20-24 Harvard Road.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Thank you.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Good luck. Good luck. I'll get you the letters of support, and I've got them signed, but I get a copy of them and get them electronically. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. Okay, got all that. Opportunity for public input, so anybody that would like to be heard, just,
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
were we gonna do anything more on the sewer update? I think we updated it in the context of informing the legislators, but
can absolutely do that, Mr. Vice Chair, if you
I think
wish to.
it's worth recapping last week's hearing and any feedback folks
Right,
have
and then
got.
I think the other aspect is, okay, what are we doing in planning for the next?
Right.
And
Are you gonna do that now, Paul?
What's that?
Are you gonna go over that now?
Yeah, and I would just say, look, I'd just start off by saying, our voice that night, in addition to Weston Sampson, was Chase, and I think he did a terrific job, and I wanna give him kudos for that, yeah, okay. And I would, at this point, just defer initially to Chase, if there's something you wanna do to sum up. I got a couple of points, I'm sure other members do too.
Well, the overall summary is that we got a lot of really great, important feedback from the community, to the extent that, and I prefaced our discussion with this, where we stand is that we're working through a feasibility study. We didn't necessarily, we don't have all of the specific answers, and the community is working with us to continue to get more resolution on that. The most important thing that we need right now is folks who are in the sewering district to send us their surveys back. What we need to hear from folks is, are they willing to participate at the price points that we established? What are their questions? What are their concerns? Going forward, actually, as Chuck suggested, it was a great segue. We anticipate putting together an FAQ, as well as some type of infographic or something, one-page sort of demonstrative that we can distribute townwide, and, as far as engage our legislators or other state representatives who may be able to help us bring this project to fruition. And so our goal is to have a draft of that probably by the end of this week, and then we'll probably work through it for a few days and tighten that up. The distribution mechanisms of that will involve all of the communication mechanisms that the town has available to it, from Twitter to emailing our contact distribution list to possibly mailing it out, although we have to take a look at what the timing on that looks like. Paul and I have divvied up the boards and committees that we intend to go touch base with, everyone from PMBC, Planning Board, Economic Development, et cetera. I think we ended up with 7 or 8 to touch base with respect to that design article. And we'll be continuing to do that. And then the last thing that I want to touch on is that we know that there are a lot of questions. There should be a lot of questions, and we are very available to come meet with you and a couple of your neighbors to answer specific questions about how this could impact you, how this could impact, you're in the district, you're not in the district. And, we understand that there's a lot of information going around here, and so it takes time to digest that. And so we are available. Shoot us an email either through the town administration, any one of the selectmen. It will find its way to the right place, and we will be able to connect you with the right information and help you understand the nuances of everything that we're trying to do. I think those were the major points that I wanted to hit on, and we'll probably look at doing another.
The Business Association has an event
That's right.
a week from tomorrow night, so that's April 3rd.
That's dedicated to this.
That's
They
dedicated
actually
to
have
the
their
sewer.
annual meeting tomorrow night, and I'm gonna be giving an update
Yeah.
then, so
Yeah.
they'll get my version tomorrow and Chase's version a week from now, and hopefully they'll match up. right?
Yeah, one would hope. And, and then the other aspect is we, sort of development between the forum a week ago and where we are today, is that Keith had a very productive conversation with IBM.
Yeah, with the landlord.
With
Yeah.
not with IBM, right,
Yeah.
the Realty Trust that
Yeah,
runs it.
so we've made contact, and we will be having a face-to-face meeting in the next couple of weeks with with IBM and with their landlord. Right. So we have their attention.
We do, I mean, like we see with a lot of our business owners, to tell them that we can present them with an opportunity to not be in the wastewater business is an alluring thing. And if we can provide some economic benefit in terms, particularly to the IBM property, in terms of, electricity, purple pipe water, et cetera, that's just great.
And at a time when the age of their system indicates that they're probably looking at a major upgrade in the near future anyway.
That's right.
I've got a couple other
Yeah,
points.
absolutely.
Based on feedback or my own observation on Monday night, three points. It's just inevitable. It was a very detailed presentation, as it should be. A lot of it was focused on the numbers. That was the first time those scenarios were being shared with folks, so there was a lot of attention properly put on that. But every time you give one of these presentations and emphasize one piece, you short shrift the other, and I think what we probably didn't spend enough time on the last Monday night is right back to the basic question, why? What are the positive benefits? What are the negative possibilities if we don't do it? And I think we gotta kind of orient ourselves back to those basic questions too. Second thing, which got a lot of discussion, was the whole concept of opt-in, opt-out for those folks who are within the district. And I know we have all collectively agreed that that's, one of our, one of the components that we're on board with. What we have never pretended to do to this point is to have ironed out the details of how that's gonna work. And nonetheless, I think our engineer had in his mind, presented it in such a way that I think it could give the impression that we made those decisions about how that program's gonna work. And I would say, and I'm sure, Chase, you agree, and board members in general, that's a program that will be fleshed out over time as we get feedback from people, which is another reminder that we're at the stage now where we're asking for design money. So we don't have everything all worked out yet. We're looking to get the monies to do that sort of thing. And then finally is on the estimates themselves. It's worth reiterating, we're working from very conservative numbers, and I think that, and they still work. But we essentially have lowballed projections on the state financing, in my opinion, others too. We've kind of lowballed numbers on the potential savings of the smart sewer components because we, you can point to a signed contract, you can't really count on that monies. And then thirdly, there's no incorporation of the effects of the sewering on growth revenues in any of the projections either for the payout plan over time. So, those are three significant financial factors that are likely to redound to the positive to both the hookup fee schedule and to the town's revenues. And yet, in the interest of doing business the way Littleton always does it, financially conservative in its projections, we're only showing what we can realistically defend. So.
Those are all great points, Paul, thank you for bringing those up. Okay, are there any questions specific to the sewer? And we can roll right into, please, Jenny.
Jenny Boyer, 18 Boxborough. So just a couple questions. I know you guys have gone into so much detail, and the presentation was awesome. You were very well spoken. Just a couple questions. The opt-in, opt-out. Just why is it that once it's in, that you cannot opt in after it's already established?
As I just said, we're not married to that.
Okay, you're not married to it.
On details, although there's a logic as to why you would have a system like that. You can't predict whether or not you can finance it if people have free to come and go as they please, so.
Right, and I've thought about
Yeah,
that, so I was
but
just wondering.
Keith has the benefit of experience of working in a community that was sewered and had a less rigid, is that a fair way to present it, Keith? system?
Well, it did, in Provincetown, it did have, there was an opt-in component to it, and the main incentive, though, for people to decide what was in their best interest was that we did not have the capacity to build a sewer to meet the needs of every property.
Right.
Not all properties could connect to the sewer. We had a limited capacity for the effluent disposal, just as this system that we're building is not to serve the entire town. It's a finite number. So, but we did say no one has to connect, but if you decide too late that you want to connect, we may not have the capacity when you want to do it. And that caused a lot of property owners, as our consultant, I think, was trying to point to last week, a lot of property owners made talk about a smart sewer, they made the smart decision to hook up when they could. So, because if they wanted to later and it was too late, it literally would be too late. The other issue for Littleton that we need to be careful about being too loose with opt-in is that who pays if a property decides to hook up later? Oh, I'll do it later. In the meantime, we're saying it's not gonna be the town, the rest of the town, people who don't have a sewer, that we're not gonna shift the cost to them, it's gonna be paid by the users. And one of the ways that we enforce that is by making sure that we've got enough people that have decided to hook
Sure.
up to cover all the costs.
From
And
a
if we-
business
and if we
standpoint, that
don't,
makes smart. That's
yeah,
a
so
smart move,
that
right?
would be one of the reasons why we can't perhaps have as much flexibility in this system as otherwise.
And then the
'cause-
other side of it too is that, I mean, you imagine someone put in a septic system last year, right?
Right.
We wanna present a balanced approach that recognizes the fact that they just put in a functional septic system, but in the long run, we still want them to ultimately connect to the sewer. So, going back, ultimately taking this full circle to what Paul said, that we haven't worked out the policy details, but we need to build a system that is as fair as possible to the people who wanna connect today, the people who wanna connect in the future, and frankly, and the people who don't wanna connect. I mean, the goal is an opt-in system. Our goal is not to pursue a system that just puts a sewer in front of your house and sends you a bill.
Sure.
As a betterment, and so we're trying to balance all those pieces. We think there's the ability to do it, but the devil's in the details, and so we're working out all those aspects.
Absolutely, right?
Deferrals or, penalties for getting into the system
Right.
late and those kind of things.
Do you
are
pay the
all
betterment
possible.
up front and then defer how much, a lot of nuance.
One thing again, I'm kind of new, so I'm just learning things, but it seems like where the residential thing is, where it's gonna go in the residential, there's a lot of older homes there, which I'm assuming that means that we have more senior citizens living there. It hasn't fully turned over yet. And I know that, from having senior citizen neighbors in years past, they don't want to invest in something big in their property because they're not gonna really get the usefulness out of it, and they need their money just to live, right? And so I'm not expecting an answer on this, but, it was brought up in that meeting that can they defer the cost so that they can opt in? Just something to think about, because those kind of costs for those people are gonna be huge. And then one other thing, just segueing into, or from, there's a finite thing. One thing to think about too is it expandable? Because as Littleton continues to grow, I mean, we're gonna build it so that I'm assuming, so that there is some room for growth, but at some point, there's gonna be a finite amount, right? And then we're gonna be at the exact same spot again. So is this smart sewer able to be expandable for the future? It's just something to think about. Is there an answer for that, or is it?
Not so much an answer as there's some history. Yeah, I mean, it would just, when it was first proposed that we needed a sewer, the folks at the water department, the Board of Health that were identifying this as a problem actually highlighted 3 areas of town that needed it for the hydrological reasons, and that's the Long Lake area, the Depot area, and the Common. Make no mistake about it, all we're proposing right now is the Common District.
Right.
The boundaries are, I mean, we've altered them on the basis of people inquiring, gee, I live just outside of the last boundary I saw, I'd love to be in it, so we made those kind of.
Which we actually had more of, I mean, not surprisingly, on last Monday night too.
Right.
Right, yeah, so I mean, it's flexible, it's certainly at this stage of the game, and,
Right, well, I just live
But-
in a lot of towns where they built something for the moment, which was great, and then they outgrew it, and then they just kept kicking the can down the road because they didn't wanna go through all the fundraising and the hassle again and have to redo everything, so.
I will say that one of the objectives of this, one of the critical components of a smart sewer is that it is constrained in its focus, right? One of the things that we're concerned about, and one of the reasons why the district is where it is that what we don't wanna do is incentivize development of a whole bunch of agricultural land, right? So as the sewer gets bigger and you start running it by all these otherwise open space parcels, we run the risk of incentivizing growth and development that we don't want. So the size here was selected to achieve, these balancing objectives of economic development and growth in town, addressing environmental concerns, but also growing in a smart way that is
Sure.
controlled. But as Paul said, it is expandable in a modular sense. We can tack on additional units down the road to address the concerns in particular areas. And we've had lots of questions about the lake, and it's long range, something that we absolutely
Sure.
wanna go after.
Okay, I'm sorry if you've already talked
No,
about
no.
it.
it's
No,
just-
Paul and I will talk about this ad nauseam. I mean, just keep
There's
them
a
coming.
ton of detail and it's
Talk all
easy
day
to
long,
miss.
as long as it ends up in a yes, I'm happy to talk all day long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Crowley,
So listen, I'm one of those elderly,
who are you, sir?
Richard Crowley. Richard Crowley, I live in Keith Street, and I'm one of those elderly people, and I said yes. I mean, it's an investment in your property. Yeah,
It's true.
and it's an investment in the town.
That's
how
true.
I see it. Yes, when we can return the water back, cleaner, or as clean as it was when we got it, it's terrific. Right now, it's not going back that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But I know that not everyone will probably think that way. Like our neighbors in our last town, there were things that they really needed to do to their property, but they were just like windows, that helps, it helps keep your heating costs down. But they're just like, we are not gonna get the use out of these windows to make it worth the cost.
Well, and to get to your point, one of the nuances of the financing that we put forward is essentially a low-cost loan for the betterment. So the betterment, what did we project it at? $22,000. What we are not saying to property owners is, you gotta cough up $22,000 today.
Right.
What it was predicated on, I mean, folks can if that fits their financial situation.
Right.
But one component of the model that we put forward is that you can spread that betterment out over 20 years at a very low interest rate that is comparable to what the town can borrow plus, I think we added 0.5%
Sure.
on top of that, which beats pretty much any other borrowing opportunity that these folks might be able to access to fund that. So, and we're willing to continue to engage in those discussions of what's the right policy point at which to fund this and how we do it so it meets the needs of as many people as possible.
Right, and that's why I thought the deferment might be, it's an interesting idea, because even a couple $100s a month for someone that's on a very limited budget with Social Security and things like that, that's gonna be a huge amount of money,
But
right?
make no mistake about it, one of the primary objectives here is to help folks manage those economic problems, because the other side of it is they go to sell their house or something like that, they fail a Title V, or their septic system just goes into acute failure. Now they're looking at, the average number was $35,000 or $40,000 to replace it. So,
Right.
we're trying to help them manage those uncertainties as well.
Which is
So,
totally
trying
smart.
to
Yeah,
deal
it's
with
so smart,
all
and I
those
think,
needs.
and I thought it was great that you offered that, right? Another, just in thinking about it, if they were able to defer, and then they go to sell their house, maybe what could happen is that loan, when they sell, is paid back to the town, right? And you would have to meet certain
Defer the
criteria
taxes.
to be able to do that, but
Mhm.
I'm concerned for those people because I see it around town and I know it, and a couple $100s is a big deal, but they have equity in their homes, hopefully, at this point. And so if it can be deferred, when they go to sell their house, then that can be paid off and they can still get that betterment. It's just something to think about for.
Well, I mean, we're looking for the money now, just to repeat, to do the design process. And those details are part of it, getting the language in place that, so that we're in a position to sign contracts with folks
Right.
and get going. So, assuming, and this is an assumption, assuming we get the affirmative vote in May, we're looking to be back with construction borrowing money in the fall, and by that time, all those details about opt-in, opt-out, deferrals, how it's all gonna work, we should have all of that stuff in place at
Right.
that point.
That's right, we're asking the community to come along with us on the $1.5 million design based on what we've done so far, recognizing that what we've done now is not sufficient to justify funding a $30 million sewer. It is sufficient to justify, the design makes sense, it's feasible, it's something that we can do. $1.5 million to bring it from, a feasibility study to a design level is very, very justifiable at this point and makes sense, so that we can fill in those vital details, so that when we come back and ask the town to fund this.
And it's all repayable.
So another question that I have with that,
You're pushing the limit here, lady.
I'm sorry, do I need to re-say my name?
No, you,
So another question that I had that I've not seen this number for is, we have a lot of business buildings that are empty because they can't be filled because we don't have a sewer, right? What is the potential income, tax revenue that could come in from those buildings to help offset costs? You know what I
if we can
mean?
fully realize
Yeah.
the commercial,
Yeah, like,
What
what's
we've
that
done-
benefit, cost?
We don't have a hard number for that. And there's two reasons we don't have a hard number. One, it requires a degree of projecting use of those buildings
Sure.
that, it is probably unjustifiable. But the other piece that I wanna emphasize here is that we've built the economic projections for the system based on the current properties in existence. And so any additional tax revenue that's coming in as the result of, higher and better uses of property, compared to what we've put forward is just gravy on top. So, what you're saying is a big part of why we're putting this project forward and why we think it needs to be done.
Right.
But our cost model is not predicated on things that don't exist today.
Which I think is smart.
projecting real
And this is again, I'm the champion of old information, but once upon a time, early in this process, we, recognizing we didn't have the capacity to do a full-out study of what the impact would be, we did have the Board of Assessors at the time, we being the entity that was promoting the idea at the time, look at a few isolated parcels and do estimates on if sewering were introduced into the common area, and I think there was a couple of other assumptions, increased parking and some other regulatory relief that would go hand in hand with that. What would that have the effect on certain buildings? And, there were 3 or 4 identifiable buildings in the common area, and based on what the assessors came back with, it was close to double, at least in those isolated instances at one point in time, the valuation, given an expanded use and increased, increased valuation on the properties. We can't take that to the bank, but it was eye-opening anyway.
Right, let's get
It
that
was,
information.
it was very eye-opening when, Keith, do you remember the numbers for Very Fine? When the plant was closed, we were getting
Well,
$60-some-odd
yeah,
thousand
well,
dollars in taxes.
its value, the incremental value of Very Fine came from when Patriot Beverage occupied the property, that its assessment went up. I forget what the factor was, was it 4 million up to 14 million, but it's a significant.
So it's significant.
Yeah.
That's a large plant, but if there's a whole bunch of smaller
You're right.
operations.
And, I'm sorry.
No, Chuck, just to go along with that, National Planners Association came up with a model for revitalizing old town centers, and it took 3 components. One was redo your zoning for that, because 90% of the buildings are out, non-compliant. Then you redo your zoning, then you don't have to go through Board of Appeals to do anything to your buildings. So redo your zoning, revisit your parking, because you don't want to predicate any kind of economic impact on the fact that you don't have parking, because these centers were built before cars. And the third model was to sewer. Now, if you did all 3 of those, the national model, the National Planners Association said that people within a half-a-mile radius of that town center will spend $2,000 per person per year. And people within a mile of that town center will spend, half of the people within a mile will spend $2,000 a year. So these are proven models. There's, Williamstown in Massachusetts was one of the 3 places they mentioned as a study. One was in Kentucky, and someplace out in the Midwest was the 3rd. So that's a benefit that you can't put your finger on today, the actual cash value that will a revitalized center would generate for the town, but it's there. Yeah, it will
Thanks,
come.
Rich. Thanks, Rich.
Yeah.
One last comment, are you good?
No, I'm
All
good.
right.
I'm good.
Ms. Strong?
Yes, Vanessa Strong, 59 Gilson Road. Can I comment on the budget from, not just the streets, but just Okay.
It's public input, absolutely, whatever you want, Vanessa.
I also volunteer for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee in town. Working with Anthony has been super, super helpful. Thank you for hiring him. Your priority list is fantastic and aligns with what the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee is trying to do. The town center, we've gotten a lot of complaints about just not being able to walk. We are trying to build an actual walkway through around the center and name it and have it be historical and all that, so any revitalization you can do there is helpful. The MBTA rail parking is, an extension is needed because it's dangerous. This is flat out dangerous. There's no sidewalks. We've been trying, but it's super helpful to know that it's on your radar too. Great. The high school, always been a problem spot. We were looking at putting flags there to help the kids cross the road and notice the inconsistencies in the towns. You know, we drove through Arlington, we see Westford, we see their flashing signs, and we get told we can't do it because of district rules and all that. So working with the state is super important. So continue to do that more and more and more so that we become more aligned on their own issues. And then 2A 110, clearly, good work there, keep on going. It's on our radar as well to make sure it's safe for people to pass. To press a button to be able to control the lights is really important to us. So if you have any questions or thoughts, come to the BPAC meetings as well, but thank you very much.
When's your next meeting, Vanessa? Thank you.
Yeah, we meet every second and fourth Tuesday at 7:30 upstairs.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Max was a nice little update for us too. Appreciate that. Any other public input? Okay, great. How about member input? In case we signed down
I
here.
just sent
Oh,
Joe a text, but to
Oh, okay.
tell him to come back with.
His phone's right there. Yeah, Steve's got him.
Steve got it,
Member inputs. So the preliminary numbers from the library fundraiser, which was supremely well done, are about $15,000 raised.
This is the golf and the.
Yeah, so between the silent auction, the remarkable number of sponsorships, I'm sort of overwhelmed by the business community's support of that. Everything from, providing food to sponsoring holes, and even sponsoring the guy who sets this up. He's got a little business and he sets up mini golf courses in libraries. So overall, about $15,000 raised and several hundred people participating between Friday night and the more family-focused one on Saturday. My kids were disappointed that miniature golf was not going to persist in the library next Saturday. So.
It was a trip hazard.
Yes, but they were very, very disappointed that they only got to play one round. So,
They could have
very
played
good job.
another round if their father paid for another round.
It's true, but I was sick of getting beat already. So
You good?
that's a big
Mr.
deal.
Knox, any member updates?
Just quickly, just want to thank the Littleton Business Association. They had a home show last week, and mostly James Kennedy, the president, he put numerous hours into it. It wasn't the success that we wanted it to be. The attendance was down, but the idea was to raise money to be able to donate to different aspects. So I want to give him all the credit in the world for all the time he put into getting that done.
Yeah, Jim puts a lot of time in behind the scenes. People don't necessarily see all that he does for the whole community, but also specifically through LBA and Littleton Wrestling as well. Isn't that polite?
Sure, so I wanted to thank the Friends of the Littleton VFW, Maureen Woods, and the band Loose Connection for the St. Patrick's Day fundraiser that was held last Saturday night to support the VFW. They raised $3,600, which was very impressive, and it was a fun night. A lot of veterans came out and supported it, and I just wanted to say thanks to everybody else who came out and supported it and helped support the VFW and our veterans.
Excellent. Thank you. It was a good night. Mr. Glavy.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm stepping on somebody else's line or intention here, but we, once again, received AAA bond rating, town of Littleton. And it's in our Keith emailed us on that, and that's, even though it's not the first time we've done that, it's still a big deal. Difficult to attain, difficult to maintain, and, you know, the list starts with folks like, you know, Bonnie Fleck and Steve Moody and the rest of our finance team, Keith, of course, and Anthony, since he's been on, current and past boards of selectmen, finance committee, but literally anybody who works for the town and manages the town's funds, department heads, employees on the street, that top to bottom excellence and accountability has resulted in our attaining essentially the highest rating we can, right, Steve? And we, you know, we don't just get kudos for that, we get great savings in our borrowings, and it affects a lot about the town. So kudos from this board and this member anyway to, especially to our finance team and everybody involved in making sure we toe the line on the commitments we make to adhering to financial policies.
It's important to continue to do so.
Yes.
Okay, a lot of the stuff I was going to mention has been mentioned, which that's awesome. Last week, I just wanted to give a shout out to Gail and Minuteman and the work that the senior diner does. I volunteered and delivered meals with the seniors that deliver these meals to other seniors and to other folks that need the meals are just amazing. And Jane does this once a month, at least once a month, and she knows these people by name, and she kind of knows a little bit about their history, and it's to see the people light up and to appreciate that somebody's looking out for them, and to, you know, be welcomed into their home and deliver a meal to them. It was rewarding for me to be a part of the Meals on Wheels program, and you know, what Gail does over there and what her volunteers do to feed our seniors is really commendable, and I just wanted to give a shout out to them and what they do.
Can I add on to that?
You may.
So anyone who would like, they can make soup and sandwiches for the seniors every Thursday. Gail welcomes volunteers to do that. The seniors really like the home-cooked soup and the sandwiches. So if anyone has any interest in doing that for the seniors, they can reach out to Gail at the senior diner. Either email her or call her, and and just put your name on the list, and they welcome that from the community.
Right. I should have said that. Thank you for piggybacking. I appreciate that. All right, next up, we have a town boards update, a little behind, but speaking about our bond rating and the
Speak of the devil, great segue.
right, exactly, great, it is a great segue, and Steve shared some of this with me last week when we got some of this news, so I'm not gonna, as much as I'm chomping at the bit and I wanna tell everybody and brag, I'm gonna let you do it.
Thank you. Well, as Paul mentioned, we had the ratings call with S&P a couple of weeks ago during one of the snowstorms, and we dialed in from different locations. So it was a little tough doing it that way, but we managed and came out with our AAA rating once again. If you read the report that S&P gave us, they talk over and over again about reserves. Our use of reserves, our ability to put reserves away with intended uses later on, and our ability to replenish those reserves and following our policies. And that's one of the big things that they kept harping on during the call is our policies that we have in place, and you know, kudos to everybody for following those policies and making sure that we came out as well as we did. We did issue the bond. We took bids on last Wednesday. We had 10 bidders for this bond, so it was a lot of you know, support for it. We very rarely get 10 bids for our bonds, but this was, I guess, right in the sweet spot. A 10-year note, about $7 million. Out of the 10 bids, they were all within 6 basis points of each other, so it was very competitive. The winning bid went to Janie Montgomery Scott. So the bond is a $6.8 million bond, 2.22% true interest costs. So we got $520,000 worth of premium associated with this. And the premium is used to reduce the amount of the borrowings. So we're actually borrowing less So our projects are more than that 6.8 million. So it's covering, you know, interest costs, issuance costs, and things like that. As part of this bond, so the bond included Alumni Field, included the Williams property on Boxborough Road, and we also refinanced two previously issued bonds. 2008 bond, which was the middle school, which is a debt exclusion item, and also the 2005 bond, which is a couple of land purchases, plus the wastewater system at the high school, which was another debt exclusion item. So we're gonna be saving on those debt exclusion pieces, probably about $350,000 over the 10 years. So, you know, average it out, $35,000 a year, straight to the taxpayer. You know, in addition to what we're doing with the debt exclusion stabilization, probably be able to push that out a couple more years, which is great news. That's about it. Any questions or anything? Just very happy with this.
Yeah, great outcome, and during the call, it was, and I'm not sure, it might have been Anthony's first S&P ratings call, and at the end of it, and it was an hour long, and it was grueling, I just said to him, you know, this is, in that last hour is when the rubber met the road, and all of the things that we do, all of the hard work that we do as an organization pays off. And it's right from the top. It's that the policy that it's set and adhered to by the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, School Committee, it's all part of, we don't use one-time funds for operating budgets. We build up balances and we put them in, pay off for our future retirement. We hadn't had a conference call with S&P for a bond issue for maybe a few years.
A few years.
Yeah, and so, the fact that we were at $3 million when the OPEB amount, when last we spoke was 3 million, now it's at 11 million. So it was like, oh, so you people have really been busy living up to what your policy says, and it was just, but for all that we're doing to put money, to grow reserves, put them into stabilization funds so that we can reduce the amount of future debt that we need to do, all of that, and as part of a plan. It all, they get it.
Again, they were very impressed with our ability to replenish reserves after we use them, so, which we're doing this year. So there's a lot of signatures that I need there. So
Autographs.
if you haven't
I
signed,
think
then
those
you
are
sign
stalled on
them.
you and,
Okay. I don't know if Joe.
There was one
got
time.
it. Steve, thank you very much. This is, when you told me that we got 10 people that returned the bids, it's been out to bid, and I know you're anticipating a higher, I think you're anticipating like 2.4, 2.5.
Yep.
And the fact that it came in at 2.2 something is fantastic, and that, we realize the savings from the better bond rating is the better rate as well, so it's, we appreciate all that you do, and Paul threw some kudos out there earlier, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And hopefully in May, when we issue the fire station bond, we'll have just as good a success.
Do we have any, do you have any indication yet whether the talk out of the Fed on their rate raising is gonna, does that come into play on rates we'll be looking at for bonding in the fall, if, say, we go after the sewer borrowing or whatever else?
As any little bump in interest rates floats down into this.
But has anybody kind of calculated what
It's-
we might be looking at then?
It's hard to tell. I mean, each one of these little quarter basis point bumps that the Fed does, by the time it floats down into a municipal bond, it's not a quarter of a point, it's something a little less, but rates have, let's see, when did we last issue a bond? It's about 4 years ago or so, and rates have doubled since then, because we've got 1 point something on the bond.
There's talk that they might be very aggressive this year, like 3 or 4
Yeah.
different
A couple
hikes.
more than what we thought.
But even, look, when we can go out on the open market and get
Oh, sure.
close to the true percentage interest that we can get by going through, let's say for the sewer, we're talking about The 2% is what we might get out of the state's SRF fund. We can get just a little more than that going, going to the bank.
Well, this is a 10-year loan, so
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
little different when we get 20 years,
Yeah.
it'll be a little higher.
And again, that.
A little higher when
The
you go.
sewer too, that'll be ultimately paid for by the
Users.
users.
Yeah.
All right, a couple autographs here. You ready for a motion? I am ready for a motion, thank you.
I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to adopt the form of the vote prescribed by bond counsel, a copy of which is attached here too and made a part hereof relative to the sale of the $6,832,000 general obligation municipal purpose loan of 2018 bonds of the town dated March 29th, 2018 to Janney Montgomery Scott LLC with a true interest cost TIC of 2.220980% and a premium of $520,631.20.
It's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, great.
That thousandth of a percentage point is really important.
It's out there, huh?
Or a million.
I'm telling you, I feel like Colonel Blake on MASH every time you guys do this to me.
Yeah.
Just sign here.
Yeah, Steve's our radar.
All right, this is good news, folks. We're, Alumni was a project that we did inside the levy, and we were able to bond that with a great rate. So, appreciate
Look at
your
those
hard work,
words,
Steve.
extremely strong, very strong, very strong, strong. Those are great words in it.
Strategic management, that must be you, Keith.
So what's, if it says wicked good, is that better?
Wicked, yeah, I don't know,
Wicked strong?
I think maybe Moody's uses that.
I'm getting a little moody with the,
I bet we could blow through the rest of this agenda.
We could, yeah.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
What do we have, 40 minutes for the warrant, but what's really to discuss? There's nothing.
Yeah, if you're
Might
okay
not need me
with
for that.
taking recommendations, you're all set. Yeah. But we do need your full attention on the.
We'll ultimately take them, but we'll talk about it for 40 minutes before we get there.
No,
Steve,
well-
thank you.
No, thank you, Steve.
Okay, so next up on our agenda is, the building commissioner is gonna give us an update on a succession plan. Welcome, Owen.
Welcome back.
Do you have any questions about sewer? We'd be happy.
No, not really.
How does it work in Aintree? You have sewer in Aintree.
We sure do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually came in probably the sixties where I used to live.
Yeah.
And it was a betterment program, but we opted in or out. It wasn't, that's the way it worked up there.
Yeah.
So, Roland Byrne, your building commissioner. The reason why I'm here is to ask the board to approve a revision to my secession plan that they had approved back in 2015. The reasoning for this is that although Michelle Cobley, the initial intent was to have her take the local inspector exam and become local inspector. The state at this point has not approved her to take the exam. We fully intend to move forward and continue to petition the state to do this, but until such time, we still have a deficit in my department where we're struggling. So, Plan B, as I'm proposing this evening to the board, is to shift the responsibility of zoning onto Michelle Cobley. The reasoning here is that Michelle has actively worked in zoning for 6 years. She prepares all the applications before the Board of Appeals. She attends all the appeal hearings, and she fields all the complaints that come into my office. So she's uniquely suited to take over this part of my job. That would relieve me of having to take the time out of my day, my plan review and my inspections to do zoning, which is, it can become quite lengthy. So that's the short narrative of why I'm here this evening.
The context that I think is important for the board to consider, and the last time we had, there have been, this might be the third or fourth vote on succession plan that has come before the board in the last three or so years. Most recently, in December, you approved a plan which first was found to be revenue neutral for the general fund. And what's important about that is we should realize that for the workload of the building commissioner's office, it includes not only the permanent staff, but for the inspections, if you need others, you have a revolving fund that you can use to pay for the services of those qualified inspection personnel who come and help out to do all the inspections for all the activity that we have in town. I know you had someone to focus on the point and for other.
I still do.
Yeah, and for other places around, but that what this is looking at is, in addition to those on-call people, if you will, that are paid from the revolving funds, what's the permanent capacity that we want to have in town hall? What skill sets do we want to have in a permanent capacity? And that's really what we've looked at in coming up with a succession plan, which is a term of art. The Board of Selectmen has encouraged various departments to have plans for how we can retain the skill sets within the organization as people move on. And in this particular case, we're fortunate to have an employee who's well, first off, I'm going to say we're very fortunate that for the longest time, it does seem like a long time, 30 years, we've had Roland Bernier as building commissioner in Littleton. And for the last half dozen years, we've also had Shelley Copley to assist in the office. We've seen Shelley obtain her, with the support of the succession plan and this board, that she's obtained her
CSL,
contractor supervisor's license. That's important. That helps move her down the path towards being able to meet the statutory qualifications for local inspector after 5 years of experience. But in the short time, we are looking that the staffing plan not only helps move things from Roland's already overflowed plate, because it's not only Roland, but all the other inspectors that are doing it, to another position in the organization where we see that we need to be able to hire an additional staff person to deal with the administrative stuff. And the plan that the board approved in December specifically looked at having increasing the permanent staffing level from 3.7 to 4.3 full-time equivalents, and that's done in part by, right now we have 15 hours a week in on-call work. We're looking to shift that to a permanent position and to essentially hire an additional full-time person. You had even advertised it, you've done the interviewing, also had to hire someone, but then came the problem from the state board for building officials, where we didn't want to hire that person and then not be able to, and then have not accounted for what happens to Shelley.
Correct.
Until and unless she gets her local inspector's certificate. So we went back to the drawing board. Roland came back with this plan, which I reviewed with him, shared with the board. We discussed it last week with the personnel board. And I see as one of the main benefits of this proposal that it's the specific knowledge about our zoning, which is in Littleton, which is unique. It's a unique skill set. I mean, zoning differs from community to community. The building code, by and large, does not. So that if the time comes when we're transitioning to, I'm not wishing anyone, bad luck or anything, but if for some reason Roland decided that he was ready to move on as building commissioner, among the skill sets that I'd want to make sure that we had in the organization is the zoning part, because that's uniquely Littleton. And it's important to have that in our organization, and this plan this plan would achieve that. So it has the same budget impact as the plan that you approved in December, insofar as this positions are graded and rated at the same rates. The position which would become Assistant Zoning Officer, Permit Coordinator, Business Administrator is rated at a grade 10 by the Personnel Board, which is what the local inspector was rated at last fall.
Steve, I remember the Personnel Board, and I know that there was a rating conversation that went on last Thursday,
Yep, Thursday.
and so, and there was some question as to what the rating should be, and then there was some subsequent additional deliberation, which came back to the Personnel Board. So you guys went out, you rated it, and
We
then
rated it, there was
it didn't necessarily meet with,
Before we left, before the meeting adjourned, Steve and the other rater agreed at grade 10.
What we do when we can't come to a consensus on the ratings is we take the two scores and we blend them together, and where the average scores comes out is where.
but that's typically done in a subsequent meeting, not necessarily over in the corner, right?
Pardon?
That's typically done in a subsequent meeting, not necessarily
That's
in the corner of the room.
typically done prior to the meeting.
Right.
We did not come to an agreement before the meeting started. In hearing the discussion, and we talked probably 45 minutes on this. I mean, it was a long discussion. I don't think we've ever discussed the position as much as we've discussed this one. The other rater looked at the scoring that he had and changed a couple of his ratings. So he originally came in at an 8, it pushed his up to a 9, and when we blended them together, it still came to a 10. So it was a low 10 on the scale. So that's how it came up to. I rated the job as a 10. I looked back at the original rating that Alex McCurdy and I did when the position was a zoning assistant. Zoning assistant. And it came out at a high 9 when we did that. So with the extra responsibilities, I don't have an issue with it being a 10.
Okay, thanks.
What were you driving at?
I'm just trying to get an understanding. I think that,
It was unusual that we were so far apart in this.
that's what I was driving at.
But on a
To go from
couple
an
of,
8 to a 10 and end up on a 10. And we, in good faith, we offered it up as a 10, assuming that, in order for Shelley to go for the license, we had to authorize her to become, basically to take the test. So we had to give our blessing in order for her to go for the next step, which we did. And when the state decided, no, you need, you've got your CSL, but it has to be seasoned, I guess they call it. Or you need certain education in order to qualify. So I appreciate trying to work through this and find an opportunity to reward Shelley because she does great work and she's an asset to the town. But I think that there's a lot more discussion and conversation. I'd be more comfortable having more discussion, and this can be that meeting in which we have that conversation to determine where we want to be. I mean, we're talking about budgets and level funding and level staffing, and we're creating an additional grade here, which, although it's neutral, the money's coming from somewhere. So it's not gonna be available for us to use it from somewhere else. And for Shelley's responsibilities did have to shift from her responsibilities for the ZBA currently, because she can't be ruling on zoning issues and then acting as the admin for the ZBA.
That
So
actually is the drive, is to relieve Michelle of 2 evening meetings, Board of Health and Board of Appeals. And I'd rather have her attend the Board of Appeals as the zoning administrator.
Yes, because the other position is the admin. I mean, the other position that's created in the plan which was part of what the board created in December, was for an admin, a purely admin position.
You made the comment, I didn't know what you meant by it. You said that the rating was done in the corner. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, having served on the personnel board, we never did a rating during the personnel meeting. We never, kind of went off to the side and said, okay, what did you have here, what did you have there? It was always done ahead of time. It was always done in a separate meeting.
I guess the wording could have been.
If we had a sidebar right now to discuss something, that's my perception of how that rating occurred. Am I incorrect in making that statement?
No, Joe was there.
I'm there too. You can, I'm part of that personnel board too. You didn't address anything to me.
Okay, Joe, did you, when the re-rating happened, did it happen at the table with
It
all
did
the
with a
members?
very informative hour discussion on how it was done. Mr. Gary Wilson was there. He went step by step on things that he didn't understand. It was a very informative discussion. Someone like myself, who's a layman, had to ask the questions because I always, as a layman, I saw additional work being put there, and I couldn't understand why it was rated one thing and went down. But I guess what I'm saying is that I just much rather have you say, at this meeting, it was saying it was done in the corner. It just has a negative feel to it. I thought there was a really healthy discussion that took an hour, and I had to get to work and things like that, so it took time that I did. But I stayed there that whole time because I thought it was such a great discussion to talk about that position.
I appreciate that, and I wasn't not addressing you, only because I know Steve does the ratings. That's why I addressed Steve about it. So I apologize for not including you in that as the representative of the board.
The other rater went through his ratings at the meeting and decided on his own to change them based on the discussion that he heard. It wasn't anyone on the board putting pressure on him to do it. He did it on his own.
Yep.
And I had asked him before the meeting whether he really wanted to go forward with it because we were so, far apart.
Mm-hmm.
He said he wanted to move forward, and I think he went in there knowing that he would have to change something. And he's rated positions in that department previously very aggressively. And that's how
Aggressively
he's
on
done
the
it.
high side or not rewarding the employee? How do you mean by?
Not to the low side.
Okay.
Whereas another,
Conservative.
very conservative, whereas he's not as conservative in some other places.
Mhm.
It's difficult for the outside rater to know what really happens in a department and the things that are involved. And he has some knowledge, he's worked in HR for a long time. So he does have a skill set there. But I think he underestimated this job a little. I mean, he graded it lower than where the original job was. And she was just the assistant, so.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Were you done?
Are we done?
No, were you done with your presentation?
Yeah, I'm done with my presentation. I just advised the board, I sat on the personnel committee for over 10 years, and I was a rater with Alex McCurdy. And it's very formal now when I go to the personnel committee and how they do it, because back then, we took our ratings and we discussed every factor, which they don't do anymore. They come up with their final number. So it has evolved into what you said, you show up with a number and that's what you live with. But back in the day, we used to discuss every factor, and that's how we.
The full board deliberated?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Sure, that's right.
I'd also just like to add that the other change in the job description was the title of permit coordinator, which I have been doing for 3 years and it was not on my last job rating. So there's significant points that go towards that because the other job description for permit coordinator was higher than what this grading is. So there were 2 changes in increases in responsibility to the position.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or input from
I have-
members?
I have no problem with the proposed update to the succession plan. I'm not sure how much more you can share publicly, because I find it unfortunate the state wasn't,
Oh, I can share everything. Her qualifications are all there. The state felt as though she didn't have enough supervisory experience. She's had her CSL for, now it's a little over 2 years. And for it to mature to full CSL, it's 5 years. And the fact
is
that
this
she
just the
couldn't.
timing, at a certain point in time, it'll kick in their estimation?
Well, we hope,
We
yeah,
hope.
yeah, that,
Yeah, they make a ruling on that.
yeah.
as to, you know.
Interestingly, she can take the test now. It's an international test, or it's a national test, and she can pass it. She just can't work in Massachusetts.
So she could New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and work, but not.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but it's
Well, that's the
not
way it
not your
is.
doing, not your doing.
Right.
No.
Well, I think, I mean, I typically don't, well, I'm not gonna make a comment here because DOR could be watching. There's a lot of things that the government does that we don't necessarily agree with, but I think, and you could probably speak to this as well, and Mr. Mullins here, and I know he's the building inspector in Concord. I think the intention is to make sure that they have people that are qualified, so that you're not having somebody that's never worked in the trades, that, you know, doesn't know that you have to use, you know, certain types of materials, or they have to be fastened a certain way, and, you know, so that, you know, you have a party and some 15 people are standing on your deck, the whole deck falls down, you know? We see that once a year, right, on the news? So I think the intention is good, but I think that, you know, if you can be qualified to sign off on a deck in Rhode Island, but you can't be qualified in Massachusetts, maybe there's some.
Oh, we'll get
opportunity.
past this. This is
Yeah.
just a small delay as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Let me see if any of the members have anything.
I would like someone to address Ms. Cobley's qualifications for this job versus, because none of that is really included here except for, you know, a general discussion of her experience. So, I guess here's my concern, that if this is Plan B, I wanna make sure that we're putting someone in the position who has the experience to do this, who is comparable to who we might find if we were to publicly post this position. So if you could, for a moment, just speak to.
Well, it's not a unique situation where a town hires a zoning officer specifically just for zoning. The town of Air did this, and the present building commissioner, when he was hired several years ago, was just the zoning officer. And he worked his way into local inspector, and then became the building commissioner recently in the past year. Qualification-wise, I guess to answer your question with regards to whether Michelle is qualified or whether this position can hold its own if we were to replace Michelle with somebody else.
Well, right, I guess what I'm asking for is a comparison between Ms. Cobley's experience and what we might expect just if we were to hire externally. How do those two sets of experience compare?
Here's what would happen, okay? Ms. Cobley's, if you look at her job title, and there's a reason why we say assistant zoning officer, is because the Mass General Law marries a zoning officer to either a local inspector or a building commissioner. And because Michelle's having trouble getting her local inspector, we're making her the assistant, so that I'm still in charge of the whole thing, but Michelle will have the opportunity to sign off documents and appear before the board and present her case. As far as knowledge goes, I don't know anyone in town that has, aside from me, has more knowledge about zoning than Michelle. She deals with it every day. So to fill this position again, you could, sure, as a standalone. More likely, you'd hire a local inspector and zoning officer, because that's where it's moving towards.
And another follow-up question to that, if Ms. Cobley is going to be doing the zoning work, how, is ultimately the plan to transition into the building inspector work
Well,
once that license?
The ultimate goal is to be local inspector for Michelle. Whether she chooses to move on beyond that, I don't know. She is so close right now, and that's the ultimate goal. To me, this is a temporary stepping stone. When she does achieve her local inspector status, she will automatically, if so choose, if the town so chooses, to be the zoning officer.
And in terms of the additional experience that she needs to get certified by the state, will she be able to accumulate that experience in this position?
We're working on that. Oh, in this position?
I mean,
Unfortunately.
I guess what I see
Yeah.
here is that, are we at a place where this bifurcates? And she either goes down the zoning route or she goes down the inspector route? And how do those fit together?
Well, I don't see it as a problem because Michelle intends to pursue local inspector. She can also, if she chooses, just remain zoning officer. But in this state, Mass General Law requires that you are at least a local inspector to have the full title of zoning officer, which is specifically why I wrote assistant.
I mean, I guess I do see it as a problem in that if the expectation is that you accumulate a certain amount of experience, in her current position, she can't accumulate that experience except by years of service. She's not accumulating any actual technical knowledge.
Okay.
That concerns
I
me.
understand. Well, and, I'm in touch with the state right now, as a matter of fact, to get some guidance as to how we overcome that. Some seem to feel it's not a problem, but some do. And I see what you're saying. Unfortunately, when you appear before this committee and you say, well, what will it take? They don't tell you. They just look at you and go, I don't know. Until they are comfortable that Michelle has supervisory experience, whatever that means, whether it's in construction or whether it's general supervisory. One of the questions at that hearing that I went to with Michelle was that Michelle has 20 years' experience in the civil engineering office. And one member of the committee kept asking, did you supervise anybody? And Michelle says, well, no, I just worked for the civil engineering company. She was a draftsperson. She occasionally represented the engineering firm in front of towns. But did she have direct supervision over anybody? No. And she says, I'm not gonna lie to you. But that would have been enough for that committee to approve her as a supervisor, or having enough qualified supervisory time. And I found that unique because civil engineering deals with soils and, property bounds and septic systems, and she's uniquely qualified to talk about that. But did she swing a hammer? No. Did she supervise anybody swinging a hammer? Probably not. She has her CSL now, and she will pursue some work on the side, I'm sure, to exercise her CSL, because people are interested, unfortunately, in a woman CSL person, and they want that type of person on their job. It's just the way it is in the world. I know what you're asking. It's like, can we get over this hurdle?
Well, can we get over this hurdle? And down the road, what I'm not interested in doing is setting up a plan in which Ms. Cobley goes down the direction of zoning, only to a few years later transition back to what we're saying is Plan A now, which the state is not allowing us to do. We're not doing our residents any service if in those intervening years, going down path B, she's not accumulating the experience that ultimately sets her up to succeed in path A. If all we're doing is checking off the box so that eventually she can transition back to path A, we're doing, in my opinion, a real disservice to our residents. Because that knowledge isn't being accumulated then. The expectations of the state are being trivialized.
I guess I have to disagree with you that she doesn't have supervisory experience and that she's not gaining it as zoning officer. Every day, you're out supervising somebody in zoning. It's just, there's no way about it. And I guess I fully understand why the state marries it to a local inspector or a building commissioner, because those two jobs, the building code and zoning, are so interconnected. You can't operate one without the other. You have to know building and you have to understand how that all works in order to exercise zoning.
I guess I'll say this, I don't object to Ms. Cobley in the plan being to go down the zoning route. What I will object to, though, is if in a few years, we pivot back.
But you have to understand, though, you don't pivot, because when she achieves her local inspector, she's a zoning officer, because those two titles are married together according to Mass General Law. It just makes it easier if she was local inspector, and that was the initial intent. She will, let's suppose, 5 years down the road, she takes her exam, the state approves her to take the exam, and she becomes a local inspector. I come back before this committee and say, I'd like her now to be the local inspector. You're gonna ask me, well, what about zoning? Yep, she does that too.
Except in that scenario, the succession plan means that the person who we're now going to identify as a local inspector will have done only the zoning and none of the actual inspection work,
You mean building inspection?
the actual building inspection.
Right. Suppose we could resolve that by doing what I was doing earlier and have her shadow me, but that doesn't suit the town as far as I'm concerned. I need somebody to do my zoning, and I understand your concern. Ms. Cobley's not going to stop pursuing local inspector, and she'll do whatever it takes, whether that's through education, whether that's through, additional class time, whether it was suggested by the state that she get her DBA. I don't know what that does for a supervisory experience, but it matters to the committee that if she had a DBA, I guess, it works. And it bothers me a little bit, because that doesn't tell me anything. You can have a CSL and not build a darn thing, but you can have supervisory guidance over people that build. And that's the whole point of the CSL. You don't have to be a person with a nail apron swinging a hammer. All you need to do is be on that job site and have your eyes over there and say that's incorrect or that's not being done correctly. Just because she's zoning officer in this town doesn't mean she's not doing something elsewhere.
So where I stand is that as far as a plan here, I'm fine with this succession plan involving Ms. Cobley going on to become the assistant zoning officer. I will have some questions and concerns if we decide to pivot back in a few years.
Yep, no problem.
And what I would emphasize there is that I would expect to see, I suppose I don't need to tell everyone, I would expect to see those additional components of a resume put forward that substantiates doing more than just the zoning supervisory work.
Agreed.
Otherwise, I think we put the town in a bad position by moving someone into a role in which they're really only qualified on paper.
I wish I could show you one letter of support that I got on behalf of Michelle Cobley. And it came from a resident in town who was remodeling a house and building an equally large addition for his family. It was a unique situation. And Michelle attended every site visit, and she walked through the building, and I actually allowed her to make her own decision with my guidance. And in the end, this gentleman offered a letter of support, and he happens to be the Dean of Construction at Wentworth Institute. And it's a wonderful letter, and it codifies Michelle's effort in getting to the point where she is today. And the committee never read it. The committee never even looked at it. They were set to say no. And so I'm gonna hang on to that letter. Now, whether Michelle can do online classes, get her associate's degree that way, fine, that's all she needs to do is get an associate's degree, and she's off and running again. It doesn't matter anymore whether she has supervisory experience. Now she has an associate's degree. It's a little awkward, but it's the way the state's set up.
Okay, I mean, and that's, when we revisit this in a few years' time, it's exactly that sort of thing that I'll be looking towards before
We'll have that answer for you.
we pivot back to
Right.
what is currently Path A?
Right.
John, any comments?
All set.
The only thing I'm gonna open this up, but, so if we were to reclassify this, it reclassifies the position for Michelle, because we did reclassify, and then the game kind of changed. So we're reclassifying this for Michelle now. We're not looking for Michelle to go anywhere, but if Michelle leaves, then this position is classified as a 10. And we're gonna have to look for a very specific skill set. You just walked us down the road for why Michelle's qualified and why she has earned this classification of a 10. Well, my concern is that she's earned this classification of a 10, arguably. In the event that Michelle does leave, we have this position
When
that is classified as a 10.
when Personnel Board looks at a job description, we're looking at the job and not the person. Whether the person can do the job is up to management and the board. We're just looking at where does the job fit in the salary structure of the town, that's all. So we're not looking whether Michelle can do the job, we're looking at what the job is. Make sense?
We're kind of creating what the job is and then classifying.
And then management fills that job.
Or to answer it a different way, if Michelle were to leave, I would expect the same thing from the new person. I would want them to do the same thing. Zoning officer, permit coordinator, and business administrator. I'd have to, I mean, that's the way it works.
Would she be able to be a business administrator if she's doing zoning enforcement?
Well, business administrator is just supervising over the clerical help that hopefully we will get shortly. The unique thing about Michelle is she can step into any part of the department and carry it in the absence of anybody, which makes it it's just unique. So I can't lose her.
Thanks, Ron. Mr. Mullen?
Thank you, Ed Mullen, 10 Grist Mill Road, also happen to be a building inspector. First, I want to say that I have the utmost respect for Roland and his department and Shelley and the work that she's performed. My question would be, and I support the idea that's being bounced around, I was a zoning enforcement officer and building inspector in Newton before I moved to Concord. My curiosity would be, how long is Roland staying? Because I think if he can manage this down the road where she does get her certification, it's a win. And that, I'm in support of this whole idea. I think it's great. One, zoning enforcement is very important. Two, I think they're both shown their capabilities as inspectors. I know she's been shadowing. I've heard from several builders out here that it's been a good job. They haven't had any complaints that I've heard. I'm also a contractor, so I talk to a lot of people. Excuse me. So I'm just looking to see if we have that commitment from Roland to make this process go down the road. Because if he's jumping ship, it's kind of like the Tom Brady scenario we got going on here. When Tom Brady retires and we gave up Garoppolo, we're losing. So as long as Tom Brady's staying, we're good.
Pretty uncomfortable. You gonna start your own Facebook thing?
You used to answer that question.
RB12?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like RB 20, maybe, I don't know.
I have no intention to leave at the moment.
And honestly, I don't think we have a right to ask, do we?
No, I didn't ask.
I wouldn't ask. I can tell you I'm
Speaking
only
as a resident,
61.
that's all. I just looking.
No, I get it. I appreciate the insight.
Because I heard your question, yeah.
I think he was answering Mr. Mullen through the chair, that's all that was. Okay, so anybody else have anything, any questions? Board's okay? All right, so, entertain a motion, I guess, is there any more deliberation or conversation? No? Entertain a motion.
Board of Selectmen vote to amend its vote of December 18, 2017, and approve an amended request of the building commissioner to increase staffing for the building, zoning, health departments from 3.70 to 4.33 FTEs, including a full-time assistant zoning officer, permit coordinator, business administrator, and a full-time administrative assistant for which the fiscal impact would be funded by the building inspector revolving account.
Hold on one second before we get seconded. Just the, this would take effect once you get somebody up to speed to kind of fill the responsibilities that Shelley will be vacating, I would assume.
Yeah,
We actually had candidates and had done.
we had an excellent
I don't know if
candidate and
have
we
to-
lost her.
Yeah, so we'd have to
Delay,
re-advertise.
so we'll have to go through this process again, but.
So do we want to put anything about the effective dates or anything like that? Just because, I mean, we don't want to have want to leave a vacancy
Yeah,
until such time as we have
well, I
backfilled.
think what we'd be doing.
That's a true succession plan.
Yeah, because we've got two positions here, I mean, like, on the table right now are two new positions, if you will. The assistant zoning officer with the permit coordinator, and then the admin assistant.
Right.
So I think so one or the other of those positions would not be filled, and I would say, let's fill the grade 10 position and go out and post and hire the grade 6, because we can fill in with temporary people in the meantime while
We
we're
presently
filling
have a
grade
temp
6.
right now,
Yeah,
15 hours.
yeah. So
So
I
in
would say
essence,
it would
you have
take
that.
effect upon vote.
Is that?
So in essence, it has been backfilled.
Yeah.
So it would take,
that same person would be able to pick up anything else that,
Oh, yeah, she's doing it right now.
I just
Yeah.
don't want to leave, if someone goes up and tries to
Oh, no.
see Shelley to get something taken care of, and Shelley's not there
No,
because she's
no,
out doing zoning enforcement.
no one's
That's frustration to the residents. I mean,
you're not leaving.
well, it's not the
Sue's
point,
not
I'm just
leaving.
trying to think of the
No,
impact to the
no,
residents.
in terms
Right,
of-
no,
yeah.
there's always somebody upstairs.
Yeah.
In fact, we have some pretty good coverage from the other departments, from conservation and from
Overlapping
planning board.
coverage.
Yeah, it works well on my side of the building.
I can also say that I travel from town hall to town hall, building departments and whatever, in my line of work. And I can also say going to Littleton is one of the best because there's always someone there that can assist you. I go places where I get a sign on the door, be back at 3, and the person isn't there at 3, so I mean.
Yeah, I know, you mentioned that. Okay, so as long as that's addressed, that would be my only concern. So Joe's made a motion, here a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, so, we do have to take a look at the warrant articles. Folks, I'm gonna leave, if you guys are okay with that.
You okay with us doing recommendations?
You okay with me leaving in order for you guys to do recommendations? I think, yeah, there's nothing that I'm terribly, I think we're gonna.
Trying to dodge a tough vote here?
Not at all. I'm in agony. Before I do go, though, one thing I missed during member updates is, and Keith, I think I gave you a shout out when we celebrated your anniversary in January, didn't I? I think I did. I think I said something about wanting to get a cake, and I never did.
No, I did.
You gave your own shout out.
Yeah.
And I just piled on.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna give Anthony an opportunity to give himself a shout out, because tomorrow is Anthony's 1-year anniversary with the town. So I'd just like to say
Yay.
congratulations and thank you. Anthony's been a huge asset, and he's been, my first year as chairman, it's been, it's been a pleasure working with Anthony and Keith, and Anthony has certainly made my life a little less stressful. Sometimes it's added stress, but mostly less stressful. So,
Oh, we've got to put all those things in Anthony's job description now, so it's appropriately
yes, we
graded
do.
and rated, so.
Yeah, that's next up. So, I apologize for vacating, guys, but I'm, maybe go do ice or drugs or something. I'm in a little bit of pain, so.
I'm gonna jog
Hand you the
in from
gavel?
bullpen,
Yeah, so pinch
If you
hitting,
don't mind, I'm gonna do it right from where I am.
pinch hitting,
right?
Mr. Glavy will, lead the meeting from here. I apologize for leaving you guys. I'm pretty sure you got it.
So, Mr. Vice Chairman, procedurally, we've got an initial vote to determine the order in which the articles appear, because we then post the warrant accordingly, and we've got the copies of the warrants to sign. And what put up on the screen here is the list in which the articles appear in this draft. And that was the special town meeting, this is the annual, this is the order in which you've seen them several times.
Grouped
no
as they
changes.
often historically are, putting like things together in
Yeah,
this kind of-
yeah, in the annual town meeting, we've got financial articles come first, then articles requiring supermajority votes in the middle, and then other routine articles at the end.
We haven't had any special requests to move or.
No, at previous meetings, we'd had the planning board and the council on aging suggesting that certain articles for senior housing be moved earlier. We don't have such things and have not had any special requests for timing.
And since she's here, the clerk is here. Is the clerk familiar with the ordering as proposed?
I'm familiar.
Okay. Are you okay with the order as proposed?
There was a little laugh there.
I'm fine.
Is this a one-nighter?
I'm hoping.
I hope so. Depends on how long we
Sewer.
talk about.
It's gonna be all sewer. Is there any surprise out there other than
Sewer,
Plastic
plastic
bags.
bag, and
Oh, the marijuana thing.
12
Marijuana,
Yeah,
true.
yeah,
yeah.
that's true too.
I wonder how long a discussion of the light and water borrowing will go to. I mean, it's a big chunk of change though.
7 million.
That's
yeah.
true too. Yeah.
We won't even be discussing that tonight because we don't have backup. So that was, that and the other thing I wanted to point out on the screen anyway, that I put these little icons with a finger pointing at those articles that you should be able to vote on a recommendation tonight because we talked about them enough. And for those that say, in the right-hand column, 4, 9, 18 with a check mark, those are ones which I would ask that you take up at your next meeting. It's only tonight and 2 weeks from tonight, then the town meeting report goes to press.
What's the exact day that goes to press too? Just because Paul and I are trying to touch base with committees that may
Right.
be
Yeah.
interested in expressing their
The,
opinion.
the
with respect to
morning
this.
after April 9th. So
Okay.
it's got to get to I got to have as close to 2 full weeks for the printer to be able to turn it in.
That's fine, we just,
Yeah.
Although if boards come in with votes after that, the
If they come in late, then we can so advise town meeting, but it sure
I
does
would
help.
rather have it written down.
It sure
it's
does
just a
help.
question
possible.
of getting on people's agendas between now and then. I don't know
Yeah.
if you had a chance to email last week. If you,
For dates when
Dates.
boards meet, I don't.
Sometimes we only know
We
48
don't
hours in
know.
advance. You know, so it's kind of, there's
Yeah.
BPACs every other week, we know that tonight.
I don't know when the
I'll go to
EDC
calendar
meets next.
myself.
I've been
All right,
around my-
here's what I'll try to do then is, as far as this goes, on the ordering, folks, any objection to the order as proposed?
Something's gotta be last. I mean, anytime, if we move something that's gonna be debated more up front, then that just pushes everything
I'm
else later.
I'm personally not a big fan of monkeying around the game, these things, just let it go, whatever.
I have no problem the way it is.
We,
So that's
we have a motion then on 6A.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the order in which articles appear on the warrants for the May seventh, 2018 annual and special town meetings as presented, and to direct that the constable post said warrants forthwith.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The opposed? No, none.
And we have the warrants there in the long form. If there's signature pages to be signed.
And while we're doing that, you heard the intention that Keith had about voting on those items that he feels we are in a position to make recommendations on now, and holding off the balance of certain articles that we might want to vote on until, what is it?
2 weeks from tonight.
2 weeks from
Yeah,
tonight.
and that
Okay.
will be the last opportunity.
That's the last opportunity. And I'll certainly entertain any changes to that list if you, any individual members want to either hold one off or think we're prepared to vote on it now, that's
Can you go
fine.
to the second page on that, just to see the?
Yeah, well, I would ask Keith to go through these individually.
Yeah,
too.
sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
But in general, is that process all right? We'll go through the items individually. The process will be Keith's recommending ones that he thinks we can vote on now. If you're not comfortable with that, we can either have a discussion, we can put it off to the 9th. If there's something that you think we're in a position to vote on that we're not, it's not currently on his list, we can do it now, right? So we might as well just roll through them.
Okay, so starting with the special town meeting, and the detail is, if you take a look at the, in your packet, if you look at item 6B, there is a mock-up of the first of a draft town meeting report, which contains the articles, motions, and recommendations. For the next meeting, we'll have recommendations on if we have any bills of prior years or transfers for the current operating budget, but not tonight. Article 3, appropriating bond anticipation note premium, is a very technical article brought to us by the Finance Department with the change in the Municipal Modernization Act. When you have leftover amounts, even if they're small, and in this case it's $1,000 in one bond issue and $500 in another, you have to go back to town meeting to revote them. So we're proposing to spend them on the fire station, to apply them to the fire station project. So it's really a housekeeping article. The community preservation, the blended fund into the CPA, you voted just at your last meeting to insert this article, adopting the percentage figures that the Community Preservation Committee had recommended. Because it also involves, I'm sorry, I skipped over number 4, stabilization fund. Consistent with the financial policy for Article 4, we need to use stabilization fund monies. We need to in order to fund Articles 5 and 6. Article 5 has a total of let's see, where is it? Of course, I can't find
It's about
It's a-
$300,000 or $400,000.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah.
There's 5 pieces of it.
Yeah, it's, I just can't read my writing, it's so small. Oh, yeah, $272,000 we need to put into the blended CPA fund from general revenues. And we're proposing to do that first by taking it out of free cash, putting it into stabilization fund in Article 4. Then take it out in Article 5 to fully fund the blended CPA for a 4th year in a row. Article 6 proposes to set aside $350,000, financed in the same way. Take it from free cash, put it into stabilization fund in Article 4, and then take it out in Article 6 in order to fund the new fund that we're setting up for injured on duty compensation for police and fire. So, and that will make sure that we have enough money to pay, enough cash to pay some bills that will be coming due soon. So it's consistent with the financial policy, and the use of stabilization fund in 5 and 6 will require 2/3 votes. But I think we've talked about them enough that you could, I would recommend that you vote to recommend those articles in the special.
The home rule petition, why wouldn't we be able to vote on that?
Well, because we have not presented to you with the specific language that's gonna be offered under the motion. That we're still working with the union, Labor Council and the union are crafting the final language of what the petition would have, and we'll have that in time for our next meeting.
Any questions on the special warrant? I'd prefer, I guess, or I'd suggest we do a blanket vote at the end, but,
Yeah, I can walk through the annual next.
are we okay with the recommendations on?
Yeah.
Okay, on Article 3, revolving funds, this is a routine article now, where a year ago we established town bylaws under the new state statute. We established revolving funds as part of our bylaws, and now annually you need a town meeting vote to say what's the maximum amount that you can spend from your various revolving funds, so that's what we're doing. The operating budget, we came to a agreement at the last meeting. You voted to recommend the school committee's budget at a certain level, and you voted to reduce the town's budget by $25,000. And so we've reached equilibrium, and so I think we're in a position to recommend that budget. Bonnie is crunching the numbers on the specific dollar amounts to go into each budget, which will, each line item, which will reflect accordingly. The debt exclusion stabilization fund, Article 5, is where, because it requires a 2/3 vote, use of stabilization funds, we're carving out the amount of excluded debt that would be paid down by using debt exclusion stabilization fund monies. So that ends up being $338,000 that we will be applying in debt exclusion stabilization fund to pay down excluded debt, which basically means that's $338,000 the taxpayers will not have to pay, because we're using, we could otherwise add it onto the tax rate because it's excluded. We're now spending it down so they don't have to pay it, so it's an absolute savings to the taxpayers.
Did you keep talking until you saw the light bulb go off? Yeah.
Next, we have enterprise funds that have been, Article 6 from the Water Commissioners, Article 7 from Park and Recreation. Both of those we've reviewed,
And what,
yeah.
what is our role with respect, this is more education than specific to this article, with respect to enterprise funds, particularly, you know, the water enterprise fund operating budget?
Well,
these are numbers that we've never really seen, we've never really touched on. Should we be recommending them?
Yeah, I would say as a matter of policy that the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee should recommend on all of the financial articles.
Right.
And we excused Mr. Edwards early last week, because he had just finished, you know,
Yeah.
all the storm.
Job
work.
well done, you can't.
But that, what I take as very significant about the Water Enterprise Fund, and why I'm very pleased about this, is that over time, the balance of of what Water Enterprise free cash has grown. It used to be hand-to-mouth, it used to be there was no reserve whatsoever, the water rates were kept, I'd say artificially low, that they didn't, that they.
No set aside for
No
capital.
set aside for future capital investments, and we see now that Water Enterprise Fund free cash, current balance is estimated at $1 million, a year ago, and the year before it was 800,000, the year before it was 550,000. So they've been building up through rate increases, through, you know, managing their enterprise. They are putting money aside for the capital articles that they know need to be done.
And that was worked out in kind of jointly between our board, the Finance Committee, and the Water Commissioners about their need to do that.
Yes, that they were.
They were looking at the potential of, you know, either big borrowing.
Right, and I recall
Right,
those
at least have
discussions.
some money on hand to offset the.
Right, because they had there was under $100,000 a year in free cash, and that was not enough to float the boat for the future. And so they raised rates for starters, that was necessary, given some of the capital investments that they needed to undertake. And that they are, and that at these levels, they're committed to, you know, being able to undertake the debt service that, for the $7 million project. That said, I'm not recommending you vote tonight on the $7 million project. I'd like you to vote on that.
Yeah, I'd like
For
to
that,
know
I
much
want
more
them to
about
come
that.
in. Yeah, I want them to come in and talk to us, and they're gonna be at the Finance Committee meeting next Tuesday night.
Are you anticipating they're gonna come in on the 9th then?
And I'm inviting them to the 9th, we may I don't always have control over whether we see them or not, but they are coming to the Finance Committee meeting on April 3rd.
Thank you for explaining that.
Park and Rec has also got a healthy increase, or they've got a free cash balance of $300,000 this year. Last year it was $226,000, the year before $152,000, so that balance has been going up. And we've had the discussion in years past about what's the proper general fund subsidy for this operation. And we had established that there would be some amount from the general fund to pay for the salaries of the director and assistant director, and that's continuing for next year. Because there are some things the Park and Rec does that are not all programs and paid for by fees, but in fact benefit the town as a whole.
Right, right. We're paying for the director, we're not paying for individual soccer
For the
referees,
programs,
but-
no, the programs, those are on fee basis, so. Then in Article 8, for the capital plans, this reflects all the projects that we've talked about and the funding sources that we've talked about, and specifically that in item, under the facilities, Roman numeral 8, facilities and infrastructure, item F, Littleton Common Smart Sewer Design, that's 1.5 million that is established as borrowing. And so I would imagine what Tim Goddard would do is divide the article and vote on them and vote on this piece separately, so that since the sewer design is borrowing and requires a 2/3 vote, that I would imagine he would divide. He typically divides an article like that and takes separate votes. Community preservation budget, you may or may not want to talk about this. That the one that I know that you're aware of the $400,000 that the Park and Rec wanted for the bathhouse construction, and we talked about that in meetings past. We have not actually had a discussion about the $250,000 recommended for the acquisition of 12 Robinson Road, the Baker Homestead. Because that is that's a land article, it's not borrowing, but because it involves land, I would say that one would be divided and voted on separately, because that requires a 2/3 vote. And the recommendation of the committee, of the Community Preservation Committee, is to use $250,000 in CPA funds to acquire the property. And the article as written would also pursuant to the Community Preservation Act, it would require a historic preservation deed restriction be placed on the property as a condition of getting to using CPA funds, $250,000 to acquire it. And it would also authorize the Board of Selectmen to delegate management of the parcel to a qualified nonprofit established under state statute. This is sort of when it gets, there's really a lot to talk about on this, including if the town buys it with CPA funds, unless there's some other entity there with money to maintain it, just the town gets stuck with that. Do we just add this property to yet another one that we're using general fund revenues to pay for? Or is there a sound business proposal that's fundable to pay for the costs of, putting in replacing the septic system, putting in a heating system, things that we're told are needed to occupy the building. So I think there's a lot of work still to be done on this.
And yet you have that as a recommended.
If you want, it's, I think you might want to do all but that one.
I would prefer to do all but that one.
Yeah, I'd like to
now.
talk more about that.
Yeah, and we could schedule item,
Well, in truth, I would just as soon hold off on the article as a whole, because I don't think we had the this delineation happened after the last time we met, and Mitt was present, right? Didn't you, meeting you had with him was after our last?
The only add-on that that's happened since Mitt was here was the Baker homestead.
That's maybe true, but we didn't really get a presentation on this. And we've seen these items before, but we
Yeah.
haven't had a presentation, so they probably
We can
should.
bring them back. We can certainly bring them back, so take off.
Well, if they're gonna be in here to talk about the, item number 9, then they might as
He
well be
can
prepared.
be in
to-
for a pound.
Exactly, fine, all right, moving right along.
Moving right along, the 3 stabilization fund articles, I think you could vote to adopt 12, 13, and 14. I'll just say that the collective bargaining and the personnel bylaws, we will do those 2 weeks from tonight. We will be, and we may, with collective bargaining motion, we bargain right up to town meeting date, and as soon as we reach an agreement with a union, we add them to the proposed motion for town meeting, and that's certainly a deadline that.
And the personnel
The deadline
bylaw one
pressure.
is tied to that negotiation as well.
No,
right?
well, the personnel bylaw one is informed by those negotiations, but I think we'd be in a position to move forward with the personnel bylaw one in time for printing it in the booklet. But the board can decide that 2 weeks from tonight. The 3 stabilization fund articles, this is putting money in, so that in the case of the regular stabilization fund, we are putting in $42,000, which would bring the balance up to 2.23 million. In the capital stabilization fund, the policy says we only need to put 50,000 in. We are proposing to put 2.7 million into capital stabilization fund, which will bring it up to a very healthy balance for future capital projects to reduce borrowing. So that's a really good thing.
How does that fit with, if we, say we decide to go forward on the library on the slope site, which will require an override? If we wanted to use some amount of capital stabilization as well as do the override, we would just do an override on the balance? Is that?
I mean, you can do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, the other way you could do it is, you could put it, you put it in debt exclusion stabilization fund, because they're gonna, the library project in particular can only be done if it gets a debt exclusion vote on the borrowing, that we can't afford to take on,
Right,
$70
yeah,
million.
unequivocally, right.
So while under our policy, you could apply, you could take, when you come to the vote on a big building project, that where there's excluded debt, one way to reduce the amount of debt you have to exclude is by applying capital stabilization. So if you got $1 million there, then instead of borrowing the total amount, you borrow the total minus $1 million.
Right, so some of it comes out of existing
So that's one way
reserves
to
and
do
then
it.
the rest of it
The
is
other way would be
override.
to exclude the full amount, and then as you go, as debt service gets paid off in future year, then pull those debt service payments out of the debt exclusion stabilization fund.
Right, we found a couple
So there's a
extra
couple,
nickels to
and
throw
you
at
could
it.
even do both over time. You could do one to bring it down initially, and then you could, as time goes on, you could try to further reduce it through debt exclusion stabilization.
Okay. Sorry, it was a little off topic, but I wanted to
So,
understand.
and we're proposing to add $242,000 into the debt exclusion stabilization fund this year. So I think you could do those. Then, trust funds, that's $16,000 in recommendations from the trust fund commissioners to 12,800 would go to the high school, and 4,000 would go to an animal assistance care program, which is specifically which is the only purpose that those funds. It's a very particular trust fund which is for animal, or the Relief of Animals Fund. Senior and Veterans Tax Work-Off Program, you could approve, it's the same amounts that we're looking at next year. MassDOT, Chapter 90 funds, that's a procedural vote where in order to spend the nearly $400,000 we get from the state, we have to vote to do so. Next one, you could vote on, I think we're all set with the tax title property article.
Well, what
Yeah.
about the medical marijuana, the adult use marijuana?
Yeah.
What do we, why would you suggest we wait
Well,
on that?
because the planning board is not gonna have their public hearing on it until Thursday.
Okay, that's fair. All right.
April 5th.
Yep.
And they may or may not change it.
Just, I
between
knew there
now
was a
and
good
then.
reason, just
Yeah.
wanted to hear what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, because, and I'm going to the Cannabis Control Commissioners, a couple are gonna be in Leominster this Wednesday night, I'm gonna go to that event. And find out more. Then, the tax title property on Newtown Road, I think we're in final form of what that looks like. You could vote, if you wish, on the plastic checkout bag bylaw.
Well, let's stop there. What's the flavor of the board? Do you wanna take a vote on that? We don't have to, and if so, what's your preference? I'll go around, Joe.
I think we were up in the air on it anyway. I favor it, but I thought you weren't that, so I don't think we have a consensus on the board. I don't wanna see.
Yeah. Cindy, what?
Right, just sitting between the two of us, there may not be a consensus.
Right.
I also think that in terms of its significance to town governance, I think we would be justified in not taking a position as a board.
Yeah, look, I'm similar to Joe. I personally favor it, but I don't feel that it needs to have the board's imprimatur.
Right.
But I also think it's worth acknowledging, we certainly could take a position on it if we wanted to, but we don't have to.
Right.
And as you point out, there's not a consensus, so why, why confuse folks?
Right.
And furthermore, I mean, the fact that it's a voter petition, let it stand as a voter
Right, I
petition.
agree, yeah.
Although I, reserve the right, there's a voter petition
Oh,
that
absolutely.
I don't like or do like, and
Right.
think it's in the town's interest that the selectmen take a position on it, fine.
Which we
In
have
this
done in the
case-
past.
Right, which we've done in the
Yeah.
past. So, the consensus here is to not vote on it, right? Regardless of where we
That
can
would
go
be-
personally.
Take no vote, and you still got one more meeting if you, and you got several more meetings. You could meet at 6:30 on the night of town meeting and decide you wanna take a position on it, if you haven't done so by then. Right, so I'll take Article 22 off the consent agenda. Article 23 was the Historical Commission's bylaw amendment, which now is just pared down to some procedural tightening up, and the substantive changes is extending the period of delay from 6 to 12 months.
Okay, and pointedly, no change in the qualification.
Right, no addition of all buildings 50 years old and
Okay.
older.
All right.
We're still age-friendly, but we're
Right.
not that age-friendly.
So this reflects the basic agreement we had with this director.
Exactly, it reflects the agreement that you came to last week, at the last meeting when you voted to insert the article, as Historical Commission had modified it. And then the final two articles are procedural, borrowing authorization, compensating balance agreement. We are financial articles that we are required to do each year.
Anyone have any objection to the list, which now I guess would be as amended? There was just one deviation?
Yeah, we took off Article 9, Annual 9, the community preservation,
Right.
and 22, the voter petition.
Okay. And you have a, how do we structure this vote, Keith? Do you have a slide for that?
Yes, I do, I've got. I'll even cheat and show you this. Okay, as I go through the meeting, this is my summary. not yet published, of the meeting that's that's going to end soon. And where it says in the past tense, the Board of Selectmen voted to support. It says that the Board of Selectmen, move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support following articles, and then I've got the list here, and then I'll just strike the ones as we go through here.
9 and 23. is that
Yeah,
what you said?
yeah. So I can do that.
Mr. Clerk, are you gonna be able to handle turning that into a motion?
Yeah, if he puts it back up there.
Yeah.
Plus, I have it written down here too, so just,
Oh.
do I have to read off every article and what the article is, or just read the
Just the
article?
numbers, I would say articles, right?
Yeah,
By-
yeah,
by
'cause
number,
let me just take
Special and
off
regular.
the
yeah.
ones that I'm just gonna take off while I'm thinking of it. We got 9 and 22.
22 and 23.
Okay. All right, so it would be to move that the Board of Selectmen vote.
Move the Board of Selectmen votes to support the following articles, the May 7, 2018 annual and special town meeting warrants, and direct the preparation of the motions to be moved and seconded by said board. Special town meeting Article 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the annual town meeting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 21, 23, 24, and 25.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Moving right along. Town Administrator, Assistant Town Administrator, dedication of 2017 Annual Town. Madam Clerk, I know you watched our last meeting on this subject. I hope it came loud and clear that dissatisfaction, on my part anyway, with where we were at was not reflected on anything you did, but what the state did to you, and we just need to solve the problem.
So I did send you
Yes.
the list. So basically what has happened is what used to be a town report that I could give you. I could go into the town and send a report asking for January 1 to December 31st. I can no longer do that because it's not being done through the town. It is now being done through the state. And I can't get a report anymore. So what I do is each week, sometimes I do it a couple times during the week, when the different funeral homes call for and ask for a death certificate to be done. I print off the people that have been deceased for that day or that week. And that's what you're seeing, the different names. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's 3 people. And I print those off only for my own use. But the state doesn't give us reports,
Right.
unfortunately. So there's no way of going into the system, because otherwise they'd be doing it for 351 different cities and towns. They just don't do it.
So going forward, you're keeping your own list just on that?
Just so I have a list, so I can go
Right.
back and look.
Now,
and
it
see.
occurred to me after the last meeting, that I wonder if it'd be, since you don't obviously have staff to dedicate to that, is this something where you would benefit from having like a senior work-off, to go back and recreate the list, having somebody, but if you're maintaining it as you go along, I guess we wouldn't need that next year.
Yeah, so alls I do is just print that off, I look at it and I number them, so I know what number, because I have to give them a specific number for myself when I put it into the state system. I don't type any of it, it's already typed in the state system, so there's no typing on my part at all, so it's just, it's a totally different system altogether, so.
Right. But by this, the change you've already, and I hope the board indulges me in this pursuing, what you're doing now, does that mean we're gonna get a smaller list than we got this year? I realize, that this was the year we were facing the change, but it was kind of a.
So, no, my plan isn't to give you a smaller list, my plan is always to give you as many people as I believe should
Right.
it be dedicated to. It's just, those are the only two
Just-
people going through that whole list that I felt, fell into the criteria that we've always given
Yeah.
to be dedicated to.
Okay.
And which was anybody that worked for the town or that gave service to the town, so that's, and because we had other people the previous year who had actually passed in the earlier part of the year that we used in the previous year's dedication, so we had to kind of take those people off.
You know, even before the state made their change, if somebody had served the town for a long while and then moved away and died elsewhere, we wouldn't necessarily know that
That's
anyway.
correct,
Right.
that's correct.
So it's not a foolproof system, but,
No, it's not.
but you've made it
I've done the
as
best
good as you
enough.
can do.
So we had 111,
Yep.
111 deaths that was either somebody who passed in Littleton, whether it was at the Littleton house, or, you know, somebody who lived in Littleton. So I had to go and decipher out, you know, who it was, so.
Right.
Those were the only two names that I found throughout that whole list.
Is there any value, do you think, in comparing that list with like the burial records? I mean, would it be,
So
would
I,
it pick up? Yeah.
I get those burial records
do?
as well,
Okay.
yes, anybody that comes into Littleton. And there was nobody that stuck out.
Right, well, I'm not questioning the recommendations, but more just the process. In another year, that may well pick up somebody who
Right.
died elsewhere but got buried here, you know, because they had lived here once upon a time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Then the proposal is, Keith, what is before us? We do have recommendations from the clerk too.
Yes, the
Thank you, Diane.
The recommendations from Diane were,
It's done the additional information.
yeah, the additional information, it was.
John Bowers and Art Lazarus.
Yes.
And again, just, you know, anybody who's spent time in Littleton over the past several decades would remember John Bowers' many years of service on the school committee as well as in later years on the historic commission as well, and Art Lazarus, amongst his many contributions to the town, conservation measures, was responsible for maintaining the trails, the steward of the trails in numerous places. And for many years, he was it, and other people picking up that burden as well. But I think those are great recommendations. I don't know if folks have had a chance to review the list and have any other suggestions.
I reviewed the list today. When I got it, for some reason, it wouldn't open on my computer. It was today, but I just did it for the heck of it. I went back and then opened it up. Except I'm reading down, and some of the pages I had to go sideways. Take a look.
And you didn't catch anyone?
No.
Okay,
No, I didn't either.
all right. Then I will entertain a motion.
The Board of Selectmen vote to dedicate the 2017 annual town report to the ongoing service of volunteer citizens who contribute to all aspects of maintaining the community of Littleton, whose service has been critical in retaining our small-town character and spirit, and include the list of whom we lost since the last report was served to the town in some official capacity. And the names being John Bowers and Art Lazarus.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? I'll add this for discussion. Keith, you or somebody can find us a little biographical information as needed to, you've got all that? All right.
She's got it covered.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And minutes, we have a couple from December and January, is that right, Keith?
Yeah, November 20th and January
Oh,
8th.
November.
Yeah.
Keith,
I want to pick a little bit of a fight. I'm concerned that we've got minutes that are 4 months old.
I agree, I'd lost track of that myself. Is there a reason why we're falling behind like that? I mean, they're getting recorded, but.
Yeah, because our staff has been doing a lot of other things, managing, putting in huge amounts of extra hours on the police chief search, just in the last week. many extra hours on the police chief search before that, the town report, and we are relying on a cadre of helpers to get them done. What we're finding is that if you have a meeting that lasts 4 to 5 hours, it takes twice that long for the person to prepare minutes from it, so we're trying some.
Are they
shorthand
sitting
ways.
watching the meetings, Keith? Yeah, that's
Which
the
we're-
agonizing piece of it.
Which we're trying to do, and these 2 sets of minutes are sort of a test that I record what the motions are for all the meetings. And they have, that summary that I showed you, that's there in real time, it'll be up, the next 10 minutes. So if,
This much hasn't changed in the
Yeah.
process in that, I mean, the meetings are not a heck of a lot longer or shorter than they've ever been. And I just remember when we used to have someone present at the meeting taking the
Right.
minutes, they were generally available at the next meeting or
Right.
one meeting thereafter. And I don't ever remember having a couple of month delay. I don't know, that seems like a solvable problem.
it'll be solvable by, we're using additional help and then supervising and managing those other helpers. So we hope to be able to catch up on the backlog in the next month or so.
And I would also add that I think there's probably even more detail in these minutes than we have to have, and so I would be willing to sacrifice some of the detail in the minutes if that meant we could turn around the minutes a little bit.
I
faster.
disagree with that point. I think it's important to have that.
I agree with it, because I've looked at minutes in the past, and you can still get the general, these minutes are
These are
phenomenal,
fine,
because
yeah.
they include everything, but we've had minutes before that includes the general idea of what the topic was, without going into all the details in the end.
And I think that we should have detailed minutes. I hate seeing minutes from, a committee meeting that's, all it records is the vote. Like that,
Yeah.
that's not helpful,
Well, I mean,
but.
If you're looking at these, I mean, I consider this a reasonable middle ground. It's not just the recorded vote, but it's only essentially 3 pages, 3.5 pages of a substantive meeting. So what would you cut?
Okay.
Not-
I think other minutes I've looked at have
Yeah,
been
I agree
a
with you.
bit more verbose than they need to be, but you're right, 3 minutes, or 3 pages probably captures that meeting.
If we see another wave come in and they are, too long, then we can request accordingly. I think we've in the past given direction, both, usually me was going to add my name several times.
Yeah, we try to remember to do that.
I mean,
I mean, if you and I just talk less, this whole process will
Right.
be easier.
All right, I'll take that as a motion to shut up.
I got a nap outside there.
Then we couldn't find you.
it's not an easy job, hopefully,
I wondered,
once they get up to
I was
speed.
at the dance class next door.
Is that what that music was?
All right, do we have a motion then on the minutes that are here? It looks like our attendance was pretty good at these, so
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the meeting minutes of November 20th, 2017, and January 8th, 2018.
Elvis's birthday, yes. Second on that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. We have another motion.
Make the motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to adjourn. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you and good night.